It is the appointed time, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to the December meeting of the Park, Recreation, and Open Space Commission. And welcome to Isabel, our new staff liaison.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So excited to see so many faces out in the audience this evening. We're going to start tonight's meeting with an approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was our October 10th meeting. So if I could ask the commissioners to just take a peek at those if you haven't already, and I'll be looking for a motion.
I'm prepared to move that we accept the minutes.
Wonderful. Do we have a second?
I second.
Awesome. Thank you. All those in favor? All right. The minutes are approved. Great. And our next order of business is general public comment. This is an opportunity to make a public comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda. So if you have a comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, this would be an opportunity to come up and make a comment at the speaker stand. Welcome.
Good evening. Carol Fitzgerald, 906 Madison Street. This might be an item that's on, so I'm going to ask you. I want to comment on the Albany Hill access trail work that's going on right now. So is there another place that I should make that comment, or?
I think that fits in this open period, so feel free to make it now.
Great. Okay, well, I don't know if any of you have been up there to see what's going on. So there are a couple of things that have been quite distressing. And one was the timing, of course, that it was put off until fall during the monarch season. And even though a scientist was called in to make comments, the damage had already been done. And the other is that in the master plan, repeatedly, it mentions that soil impaction and soil disturbance are not the best thing if you're trying to restore native plants. And so I don't think we had any idea that the entire top of the hill would be graded over and that 5 to 6 bulldozers would be parked up there using the area as the staging area. So I think those were not well planned. And when I mentioned it to the project manager that I didn't see why they had to dig up on the east side of the fire trail. The access trail is on the west side. We assumed there would be 15 to 16 feet of mess up beyond the access trail that would later be landscaped, which it will. But there is no need to have gone to the other side of the hill. And when I mentioned it to the project manager, it was just a shrug that he wasn't worried about it or concerned because they could plant. Well, I am concerned about it. And of course, it's not really productive to cry over spilt milk. It's already happened. But I do want to make comment that I think there's been not the greatest care. And when you look at the master plan, which I served on both 91 and 2012, there were specific criteria for having heavy equipment come in onto the hill, and I don't think those were honored. And they're still, even though they finally removed the dozers from the top of the hill, they're still working up there even this week in the moist and the wet soil. So, sorry. Anyway, those are my comments, and you all might want to look into it a little bit as commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general comments on non-agenda items? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Bill Pounding. I was here in September when you had pickleball on your agenda, and I believe that at that time you asked the city staff to do some surveys about usage at Ocean View, And I'm not sure if you've received anything about that. I, on my own, have gone down there about a half dozen times in September and October at times when it would be expected that tennis players and pickleball players might be using courts. I went to Memorial, to Ocean View, and to the new pickleball courts in Berkeley. And what I observed pretty consistently, I actually made a photograph that I left with Isabel that I hope you get a chance to look at, is that at Memorial there might be one or two courts in use, mostly people playing singles. So if two courts are occupied playing singles, that's 4 people. I would go to the pickleball courts in Berkeley and see all 4 courts in use by people playing doubles. So that's 16 people on the courts at a time and 2 to 10 people waiting. And then I would go at the same time, you know, a few minutes later, as I sort of time-stamped on my photographs, at Ocean View, there would be nobody there doing anything. One time, there was 1 court in use by 2 people. So I think you've already know that this is an underused facility. In addition, when at your September meeting, you heard from a lot of pickleball players and some tennis players who complained that Memorial can get crowded and they can't get on the courts. Well, I went in all of 2018 and most of 2019 on Wednesday afternoons and Friday afternoons from 4 or 5 o'clock on for a couple hours, and on Saturdays and Sundays from 2 until 5, there was drop-in pickleball going on at Ocean View. Very rarely would there ever be anybody playing tennis when we would show up, and even more rarely would tennis players show up asking to share the courts with us, which we did when they asked. So to me, that clearly indicates that when people can't get on the courts at Memorial, they're not going to Ocean View. They're going elsewhere. There are 3 places to play tennis that are closer to Memorial than Ocean View is, and several others that are easier to get to than Ocean View. In addition, 6 courts in Berkeley have lights. 2 in El Cerrito have lights. So it's not a question that you can't play. So I'm hoping that you put this back on your agenda at least in January or certainly February, because in March it needs to go before the City Council in order to get on the work schedule. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Schroeder, and I just want to thank you for having public comment and for volunteering to be on the Parks Committee. We really appreciate everything you do for our city. I'm here today to advocate for basketball hoops. As some of you know, the hoops were taken down at Memorial Park. It was kind of a surprise to the neighborhood, and it's something that our kids really have treasured. It's been a really great meeting place for people of all ages. I live nearby, and I've seen all kinds of pickup games, and I've seen different groups coming together, and it's always in use, and it's a really special place. I remember one time my son got on his phone and said, "Get off your phones, let's go outside and play basketball," and that's really what makes Albany special.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask for quiet in the room? If you need to talk, I'd ask you to go outside because we're picking it up. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I know there's other basketball courts, but I wouldn't feel comfortable having my kids walk over to AMS or another place, and the boys can actually explain why the hoops aren't even that good at some of these other locations. So for me, Memorial Park is really the hub of Albany, and to have a basketball hoop there would be really important and great if there's anything you can do about that. Also just wanted to add that it's really nice to just have kids go out and play. They don't have to pay for sports. They can just get a basketball. There's no gear. Anyone can come and play. It's independent. They just form their own games, and that whole idea of just them socializing and creating something special is very missed in our neighborhood. So I'd like to invite Devin and Julian up if they want to say anything. It's a friendly audience, guys. Don't worry.
Step on up to the podium. If you could state your name and just pull the microphone down so everyone can hear you.
My name is David Frank. I'm 11. I live in Albany, a block away from Memorial Park. I used to go to the hoops at Memorial Park every day with my dad. I loved going there. I play pickup games every day. I really looked forward to it. I improved a lot there. I love doing it. My parents won't let me walk anywhere else. Also, so I take my dog down there, and when I go to the park by myself, there's nothing else for me to do by myself. And there used to be basketball. I could just shoot around by myself, but there's nothing else. It was so, I can't walk down anywhere else for basketball. We did it at night, and I can't walk down to the middle school. My parents won't let me. So it'd be really nice if found some way to put basketball courts back up. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other comments on this topic?
My name is Lukas. I'm also, sorry, I'm also 11. I live a block away, really close to David from Memorial. I used to go almost every day also. It was just a great way if I wanted to get outside or play. It was one of the only sports that I liked that I could play by myself, just to get better, just for fun. And I'd go either with my friends or my parents, or just by myself to go play at Memorial. And yeah, and it was really a surprise when they took them down, because I went to play one day and they weren't there. So I just went back home, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'll speak quickly. I'm speaking for my sons, Henry and Sam. They are almost 7 and almost 9 in a few weeks. So not only have the basketball court area been removed, but also they like to ride their scooters there. So that area we cannot save. We know we have to put portables there. So we're pleading with you guys to remove, to think about removing one tennis court and putting one basketball court there. In 4 to 6 years, when the basketball area could be restored, they'll be able to walk anywhere they want. Right now, they're not allowed to go to Memorial Park by themselves, but we hope by the time they're 10 or 11, they're able to. So 4 to 6 years is a very long time when you are 6 years old. Thank you.
Thank you. You can go ahead and line up on the side if you'd like to make comments, and that way we have a...
Hi, I'm Monica Norton. Also live 1 block away from Memorial. Also have a son who's 11 and plays basketball with a lot of these guys. He is at a baseball practice tonight, so he wrote a very long, which I will not read in its entirety, but he hates writing, and he passionately sat down and wrote this very long letter about how it's so important, even though he is not a basketball player as his main sport, it's so important for cross-training and to do different sports. He really values being able to meet up with his friends and play there. Like many people said, he's only 11. I won't allow him to walk to the middle school or anywhere else where we have basketball courts. Yeah, and it's also been a great just unifying experience in that not only does my son Liam play with kids his age, but I've walked over there once or twice and played with them. We've played with the Franks and everyone. You see all ages playing together. Sometimes some high school kids will take the younger kids and play with them. It's been such a great community gathering spot. So I'd really be appreciative if you could think about if there's any possibility or any way that we could find a way to put something back there temporarily until maybe more space opens up after the construction and the portables are gone. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Debra Bernhardt. I'm an Albany resident for over 20 years. Sorry to bring back pickleball. I got out of line here. I've been part of the committee to help bring pickleball here to Ocean View Park, converting the tennis courts And I briefly would like to say I hope we get back on the agenda for maybe February. I know the holidays make things crazy for January. I myself, to add to what Bill had said, I've been playing pickleball for 6 years, and it's changed my life in many ways, which I won't go into. But whenever I've ever been at Ocean View Park, whether it be at 9 a.m. on a Sunday or 8 p.m. or 4 p.m. on a weekday or a weekend, the most I've ever seen is 2 tennis players, and we graciously say, you know, just use the court for 30 minutes and then we would like to play. Tennis just died there. I don't know why, but it's not a thing. And the other thing I'd like to mention is that I'm part of the fundraising committee, and I proudly want to say that I just had my brother do a concert, a benefit concert. We made over $1,500 towards pickleball. He's a world-known songwriter. He did a concert for his sister at St. Albans Church to raise money for pickleball, and he even wrote a pickleball song. Someday you would really be amused by the song. So we're just really still very excited and enthusiastic about pickleball. And we now have close to $10,000 in our fund, and it's sitting there, and we're hoping to be able to co-create something with the city and make this happen someday soon. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Can you bend the microphone down? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Samara. I'm 8 years old. I live a block away from Memorial Park. The reason I really like using, I really like to play basketball. It's fun, and a lot of people use it every day. So I hope we get basketball, a basketball court and basketball hoops.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Devin Owens. I'm the 8th grade president at Albany Middle School. You know, not to flex. But anyway, so I used to play basketball at Memorial Park like every weekend. I would have this little group chat. I would text the boys, and we would already know where we were meeting up. It was going to be the basketball courts. And I just came here to piggyback off of what everyone else was saying, that hopefully we can get it back as time presents itself, as space presents itself. And yeah, I really feel like that's really where everyone would meet up. That's where we'd play basketball, ride our scooters, because we're still into that. And anything we really would do, that was really our space. So yeah, I hope you guys will take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Diego, and I recently just moved here. I live on the same street as Lukas, and I always would come to the basketball courts with my friends as well. And it's pretty unfortunate that it got took down so early, and I hope we can get them back again.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Julian. I'm also an 8th grade student, and like Devin said, we like going to the spot to meet up and like ride our scooters and play basketball. And it's kind of sucks driving by or walking by and seeing that they're not there. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. I'm Aaron Frank. I live in Albany on 728 Carmel Avenue, about a block away from Memorial Park, where there were basketball courts until just last week. Like my son David said, we would go down there almost every night and play basketball. It was the thing that we did. And we we get into pickup games with a lot of the kids that are here. Sometimes with grown-ups, it was something that the community could do. It's a sport, from an equity standpoint, it's a sport that just anybody can play. You don't need to have taken tennis lessons, not to diss on the tennis players again after the pickleball, but you don't need to have, it's just a really accessible sport that, as you can see, lots of kids like to play. And just as a father, first of all, I just want to say that when you have all these young kids who are not only not on their screens, that want to get off their screens and go to the park and play. That's an amazing thing. That doesn't happen everywhere. And we're in kind of a crisis. This is what's happening in our country. Kids are just at home on their screens. And to actually have a neighborhood where kids want to go and play together, not organized by grown-ups, not because they're made to, and that they would be so motivated even to take an evening and come here and speak in front of a bunch of adults. I think that's pretty great too. I spoke to the principal at the high school, and she told me that there are going to be portables where the basketball courts were. First, Ocean View is going to move in for their construction, and then after that construction's done, then Marin's going to move in for their construction. And so 4 years as a number very well could be, 8 years, right? Or forever, who knows, right? But these kids, by the time there's basketball courts back there, they will be seniors in high school or something like that. It's really their childhood. And there were 4 basketball hoops and 4 tennis courts. Now there are 0 basketball hoops and still 4 tennis courts. We don't want to take away tennis, but if there was some way to share so that there could be some basketball there, I think that would be great. What else? Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jerome, and I'm 11 years old. Just kidding, that was a joke.
You're very tall.
I graduated from AHS in 17, and I was also once a young kid, really 11 years old at one point, playing basketball, and that's where I honed my skills. And now I've been able to give back to the basketball community in Albany. I worked in University Village as a coach, and I've also actually taken out like metal nets to improve the situation there at the park as is. So I just wanted to echo some points that I already made and also elaborate on them. I think that we're really lucky to live in this city because there are a lot of great community hubs where you can just meet up with someone or your friends. But I felt like for me personally, like the basketball courts were the hub. And I think that, and I want to move that into my second point, that as a sort of, for the high schoolers themselves, it would be an incredibly effective addition to their experience, because without basketball courts, there's a huge population of students that really don't have anything to do during lunch or after school, because basketball is probably the most popular sport among kids high school age, I'd say. And that's, again, not to rip on any other sport, but just the empirical fact that I've come across. So you'd reach 1,000 high schoolers, which is, I think it's a pretty significant number. And as for younger children, I've noticed that the middle school is really not a viable place to play basketball at really any time besides, like, I don't know, like the afternoon, because in the evening I've seen cars going there like to shred and to like do tricks. I don't think that's a very safe place to play if you're any age. And also the middle school is also very sheltered. It's behind the school, so you can't really supervise kids. If they're your own kids, then if I had kids, I wouldn't let them play there. But I don't have the authority to say that yet. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rory Schroeder.
I'm Jillian Norton.
And during the summer, we came to the basketball court every single night, literally every single night, to play basketball, because we wanted to be on a basketball team, but it was kind of too late to register. So that's how we practiced it.
And at our school, we had basketball hoops, but when we had PE, she jumped up and she could touch the net because they're like really short, and the only we like playing at the park more because it was more fun.
Yeah, and like they said, there were 4 basketball hoops and 4 tennis courts, and now there are 0 basketball hoops and still 4 tennis courts. If you could just sacrifice 1 tennis court, I mean, there'd still be the rest. So, also, we can't always play at our school after it rains because they just did this thing where they put graffiti on the basketball court, and when it's wet, it's actually slippery. So today they really had to put cone things around it, and caution tape, and so we couldn't play basketball.
It wasn't graffiti, it was just new paint.
Yeah, the stupid thing. A ton of teenagers didn't come in and do that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gila, and I'm speaking on behalf of my brother. He really enjoys to play basketball, and, well, he doesn't always go down to the park. Well, he used to more often, but every time I go by there, walk by there, I used to see a set of people playing there, young and old. I'm not a basketball fan myself, but I still enjoy it here and there. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to just commend and thank all of our speakers tonight, and I want to especially commend all of these articulate young people who came out this evening to express their views and to be a part of the conversation. It really makes a difference, and we appreciate it. And I know it's a school night, so thank you. Do we have any other comments on non-agenda items before we move on with the agenda? Okay. So the next item on our agenda is actually a period for announcements from staff or commission members. So I'm going to let Isabel kick us off.
So I just have a few announcements. You probably all,
I just want to explain, we're not allowed to comment on the non-agenda items, but this allows us to put it on a future agenda. So this is really helpful. So I don't want you to think that we're not addressing it, but it's just that that's part of the way the law works so that we can give people notice. Thank you all again so much for being a part of the meeting. Sorry. Thank you. That's great. Yeah.
the new activity guide is out, so you should have received it in the mail. Last week. And we also have Songs on Solano tomorrow, and New Year's Eve on December 31st at the community center. And you probably have noticed also the fields are closed. We close them just before the Thanksgiving holiday, and they're closed until about February. And then they'll reopen based on weather. Thank you.
And I just have one announcement, which is to the commissioners to, this is just a reminder to put a little seed in your brain that in January we elect new officers for the commission. So this will be an opportunity to elect a new chair and a new vice chair. So I know I'm looking at some people who have already served in that role. If you have not had that opportunity, 2020 could be your year. So I want you to spend some time over this holiday season thinking about whether you're called in that direction, and we will vote on that at the January meeting.
It's usually 2 years, isn't it, Julia? Usually 2 years?
No, I don't think so. It's been a wonderful year. I want to give everyone a fair opportunity. Any other announcements from fellow commissioners? Okay. With that, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is a presentation by Margot and Mark about the creek and open space update, and we're looking forward to that very much. So thank you for being with us.
We're having a little bit of a screen issue here.
Got it? Oh, do you have it on your side?
Yeah, we're fine. I think did you lose connection? We had a loose connection.
When in doubt, plug it in.
Can we turn this bank of lights out?
Yes, theoretically, that is doable.
Yeah.
And Margot, I know we've heard from you before, but if you can just introduce yourself since we have some new folks on the commission,
Sure.
that'd be great.
I'm Margot Cunningham. I'm the Open Spaces Manager for the City of Albany. And Mark and I are here tonight to tell you about vegetation management in the open spaces of Albany.
Here, I'm going to control it. Hey, why don't
Okay.
I'm going to have a couple of opening remarks. Margot's going to do most of the presentation, but I'm going to provide a little bit of context up front and then a little bit more near the end of the presentation. This is, I think, the third year that Margot has come and done a presentation about her work, particularly in Albany Hill. This year, we're kind of mixing it up and expanding it to really all of our work on our open spaces and particularly the creeks in Albany Hill. And this is part of what we're hoping to be more of a formalized sort of communication and update to the commission about sort of our work on all the parks. So this will be looking for another presentation on more park facilities and more in the spring. Going forward, we're hoping to have this presentation more in November, so it'll line up better with when we're completing work and then we're rolling into the next year. And there's a lot of information here, so we do have time at the end for question and answers, and we can get into discussion. But if you have sort of a clarifying or don't understand something, jump in and let us know, and then we'll see what we can do and clarify things. In terms of how we're going to structure this, we have 3 areas we're going to talk about: Albany Hill, and that includes the Creekside Park area. We have Schroeder Creek, and this is a smaller section of it between Adams and San Pablo, and then our work at Cordnesis Creek. And sort of the approach we're taking, we want to make sure everyone sort of understands the scope of what we're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about the geographic limits of the work we're doing, then move into sort of the source document, or essentially where we get our marching orders for the work we're doing. Because each area is a little unique in how it developed and what's the driver. So we want to be clear on that. And then we're going to talk about work completed in the prior year, and this would be in calendar year 19, and then give a little indication of what we're planning in calendar year 20. So we're hoping that this turns into a narrative every year where we'll learn to expect more of a structured presentation. And at Cordnesis Creek, there's some interesting, it's one of the more complicated areas because the work there is actually a collaboration between Albany, UC, and the city of Berkeley. So it's unique in itself. So I'm going to jump in at that point to provide a little more context. And with that, we'll
All right.
turn over to Margot.
We're starting off with Albany Hill. And are you going to do the?
Yes, I'll
Okay.
just give you the.
All right. Next. Okay, so our work on Albany Hill is guided by the Albany Hill Creekside Master Plan. It has a vegetation management component. All right, next. So this is a map showing Albany Hill. This is from the master plan. And it shows, get my little pointer here. So this area here, this is private open spaces that are owned by the 3 condo associations on Pierce Street. And this area here is a large parcel on the southwest side of the hill that is also privately owned. And then the colored areas that you see on the hill, those are owned by the city. And they're broken up into vegetation units, they're called, which are based on the major types of plants that are growing in those areas. And you'll see that the acronyms for many of them have E in them, which stands for eucalyptus. So there is a lot of eucalyptus on the hill. But you'll also notice on the north side, right here, OW, that's the oak woodland. And then there's a riparian habitat on the east side of the hill, north and east sides of the hill. And there is some overlap in these vegetation units. Okay, next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Albany Hill. It's why it is such an ecologically unique area for such a small space. It has a diversity in habitats as well as in plants and animals. And one reason for this is that it's situated directly across from the Golden Gate, so it gets marine air, cool marine air. And the hill is also on the east side of the bay shoreline, so it gets an inland, warmer inland influences as well. These conditions allow a variety of different plants to grow, and this in turn creates a variety of habitats, and that attracts a variety of wildlife. There are about 130 native plants on the hill. Some are rare and unusual. There's over 100 birds, and there's over 150 butterflies, moths, and bees that inhabit the hill. There's also mushrooms and frogs, salamanders, lizards, snakes, and there's even mule deer that live and breed on the hill. So the next few slides, I'm going to show you, it's a short tour of habitats on the hill. The previous one was showing meadows with native wildflowers, and these are on the east side of the hill as well as on other areas of the hill. And then the next slide is showing the oak woodland, which is on the north side of the hill. And there's several large coast live oaks, like an example here. This one is probably about 100 years old. And then there's a component of native plant understory there as well. Okay, next is riparian. Schroeder Creek flows on the north side of the hill, and then Middle Creek flows on the east side of the hill. And then next, and much of the hill is this habitat, which is eucalyptus woodland with grassland in between. And then there's one more, scrub habitat, which is, scrub is a mix of different kinds of shrubs. There's something called toyon, which is an evergreen shrub or small tree with red berries. And then there is a lot of poison oak. That is probably the most common shrub on Albany Hill. And here you'll see there's our mule deer, resident mule deer that love to eat poison oak. Okay. So the vegetation management plan, it has 3 main goals for Albany Hill: fire prevention, which is a big concern for houses nearby. So we want to keep the fire roads clear for fire vehicle access. We want to bring down the accumulation of downed wood, which is mainly from eucalyptus. Another goal is ecosystem health. And there are several native plant communities on Albany Hill that support wildlife, including birds and pollinators. So we want to keep these native ecosystems intact and improve degraded habitats on the hill. And then a third main goal is access and safety. We want to keep trails and roads clear of debris, overhanging branches, and we want to increase visibility and make the area feel safer for people. And all three of these goals are interrelated, so when you improve one goal, you are improving the others. Next. Okay, this is a page from the detailed action plan in the Albany Hill plan, and each of the vegetation units that you saw earlier in that map, that colored map, has a set of tasks for vegetation management, what to do, how often to do it, approximate cost, and whether it's appropriate for volunteers. So we've been using this as our guideline for work. Okay, since much of the work that we do involves removing invasive plants, I thought it appropriate to have a definition here for invasive plants. So the California Invasive Plant Council defines invasive plants as plants that are not native to an environment, and once introduced, they establish, quickly reproduce and spread, and cause harm to the environment, economy, or human health. And there are about as many non-native plants on Albany Hill as there are native plants, and many of them are invasive. They create fire hazards, they compete with native plants, and they degrade habitat for wildlife. So when we do work, we're not able to remove every single individual invasive plant of a certain species, but we definitely put dents in their populations. And most invasives that we've been removing, they started in the horticultural and landscape trades, and then escaped from gardens. So these are plants that you don't want to plant in your garden, please. Okay, next, we're going to have a series of photos of projects that we worked on this year. So this is the first project we worked in there's a steep slope between Jackson and Taft on the east side of the hill. And there is a lot of downed branches and bark, leaves, small fallen trees, sprouts from a fallen eucalyptus, you'll see in the before photo here. And much of this material creates what's called ladder fuels, which ladder fuel is a firefighting term for live or dead vegetation that allows a fire to climb up from the ground into the tree canopy. Right here is a good example of a ladder fuel. It's it looks like a dead eucalyptus that fell against some other eucalyptus. So we also removed a lot of invasive trees and shrubs that also create ladder fuels and crowd out native plants. So you can see the difference between the before and after our work. And we filled 7 dumpsters with green waste debris from this area of the hill. Next. Okay, spring mow. This is a project we did in April where we cut annual grasses and thistles before their seeds ripened. Annual grasses, as the word definition indicates, they grow and die within a year, and then they create a fire hazard. So we cut them before their seeds were able to ripen. Therefore, we depleted the seed bank, and they won't return next year, or at least they'll be in a lot less numbers. And the fire hazard is reduced. And this also allows natives, including bunch grasses and flowering plants, to take over. And since many natives are perennial, meaning they live more than a year, they're not nearly as flammable. The contractor for this work was called Urban Tilth. They're a nonprofit based in Richmond, and I'll be talking more about them as we get to Cerrito Creek. Okay, next photo, annual fire roads maintenance. This is work that we do in the late spring and early summer, where we go along the fire roads all over the hill and we mow annual grasses, prune back shrubs and trees, clear woody debris, and cut back poison oak from tree trunks. This year, we also removed a lot of invasive shrubs, which were creating ladder fuels and crowding out native plants. And we filled 4 dumpsters with green waste. Next. Okay, on to Middle Creek. Now, Middle Creek, it flows basically east of Albany Hill, and it's unculverted behind some of the houses along Adams Street. And then it flows under a corner of the Orientation Center for the Blind. It comes out of the culvert and then flows into Cerrito Creek. Next. So, as you saw on that previous photo, you couldn't really see Middle Creek. It's basically, there is a lot of invasive thornless blackberries and Himalaya berries covering the creek. And there's also something called arundo grass, which is, it looks similar to bamboo, fast growing, it can reach 30 feet high. It came to North America from the Mediterranean, but originally it was from the rivers of the Indian subcontinent. It's actually a source of reeds for woodwind instruments, but the problem is it grows in dense stands, creates a fire hazard, clogs flows of water, it can cause flooding. So our Urban Tilth crew here, they went in and cut the canes low and then tarped them. And this suppresses photosynthesis and promotes pathogen growth, eventually killing the plants. Okay, so those were the projects that we worked on, and these are the projects that we want to do for 2020. We've got 5 projects here. We want to remove some invasive plants in the oak woodland, right in this area. And there's one particular invasive that we really want to get a hold, we really want to control. It's called passion vine. It's a very aggressive vine. It grows from the ground straight up into the tree canopy. It's a crazy vine. It will smother everything in the forest eventually if you don't control it. In the Hawaiian Islands, it has become one of the worst forest-destroying weeds, covering thousands of acres of forest. The next project we want to do is we want to continue to remove deadwood and invasive plants on the east side of the hill. That's right in this area between Taft and Jackson. We want to do another spring mow in the grasslands, our annual fire road maintenance. And then we want to do an assessment of and remove potentially hazardous eucalyptus along Taft and Jackson near houses. So right along here, along Jackson, and then Taft. And 2 years ago, we did remove some potentially hazardous eucalyptus. There's some that are on the edge of the cliff. There are others that are leaning. Some have forked trunks. There are others that have large branches that might break. So we want to have an arborist assess these trees and prioritize ones for removal. And now on to creeks. So this is a creek map, an old map I found of creeks in Albany, which I put labels on for. We've got Cerrito Creek on the north. Middle Creek is the one I talked about with the arundo grass. And then Codornices Creek is on the southern border of Albany. So Cerrito Creek from San Pablo Avenue west to Adams. And here is where it comes out of the culvert, flows along here, and I think it's about here is where Adams Street is. So this project was started by our former facilities and maintenance manager, Gail Rossi, and it involves weeding invasives and planting natives on this section of the creek from San Pablo Avenue west to Adams Street. And as you can see at the start of work here, the area was choked with invasive blackberries, ivy, and other weeds. And we worked with a creek consultant to develop a 5-year plan to remove invasives, plant native plants, and maintain this stretch of the creek. We went through a regulatory process with agencies such as the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to get approvals. And this is a part of the planting plan that the creek consultant came up with, showing along this 300-foot stretch of creek where we're going to plant natives and the different kinds of plants that we're going to plant and that have been planted. So the group, this is the group I talked about earlier, they're called Urban Tilth, and they're doing this work for us along this stretch of Cerrito Creek. And they've been working there since October 2018. They are a nonprofit based in Richmond, founded in 2005. They teach local residents about the relationships between natural ecosystems, food, health, and justice. And they directly engage community members in activities to improve their urban environment. They train young adults in a 15-week hands-on course in watershed stewardship. And then they hire exceptional students as apprentices, who then go work on restoration and maintenance projects in watersheds in West Contra Costa County and in Albany. And for this project, they are growing most of the plants that they have been planting in their own nursery. And many were collected from seeds and cuttings on, many of the seeds and cuttings for these plants they collected on nearby Albany Hill. So this is our work plan for 2020 for this stretch of Cerrito Creek. We want to continue with planting and weeding in the winter and erosion control and weeding in the summer. So they're in about 2 or 2.5 years in on this project. Okay. Codornices Creek from 8th Street west to the railroad tracks. Codornices Creek is the most intact creek in the Albany-Berkeley area. It has a population of steelhead and rainbow trout, which unfortunately were decimated earlier this year when there was a spill of firefighting foam that got into the creek and killed over 100 trout. There have been reports of a few sightings of some trout recently. I actually saw one a couple of days ago. So we're hoping that they will recover, but we're not sure. The section from 8th Street to the railroad tracks was restored between 2004 and 2011. And here's a map showing the section from, I think it's here, down to the railroad tracks there. So creek maintenance along here was neglected by agencies for several years. Friends of Five Creeks has really been the only group working there recently.
So this is when I'm going to jump in and give a little bit of the organizational context. And as Margot mentioned, yes, there's, I would say there was a gap of 5 years or so where no work was being done. And that's largely because, well, let me take a step back. There was there's been an MOU in place for restoring the creek between Albany, Berkeley, and UC dating back to 2004, and that's really provided for the restoration work and then ongoing maintenance. And some of the things that Margot's touched on was, I guess it was about 5 years ago, each of the agencies had a fairly significant turnover in staff, and this work got dropped. So I think for the last year and a half, all the agencies have been meeting pretty regularly, trying to reestablish the relationships and understand what was in the MOU and each of our responsibilities and so forth. And it's been I think a good collaborative effort. There's been, it's basically department head level engagement in this process, and my hope is that this builds something that's not so much person dependent, but something built into sort of how we do all of our business. Like I said, we have the MOU that's shepherded the restoration work. It has really established responsibilities for each of the agencies, just at a really high level. Albany has functioned as a bit of the project manager during the construction activities. We've, as I understand it, engaged with the architects and engineers and construction side of things. As elements get completed, it gets folded into the MOU's maintenance provisions. And again, there's set responsibilities. Albany is responsible for the monitoring piece and vegetation piece. But then we have shared responsibility between Berkeley and Albany for trail maintenance, and UC has responsibility for trash. So it's something that's been negotiated back when the agreement was put in place, we're trying to understand that, and there'll probably be tweaks, but we're trying to follow the spirit of what was set up, back in 2004. Then there's also funding requirements. Along with this project, there was some money put in an escrow account to help fund some maintenance work. We've now have that money. Actually, one of Albany's jobs is we're the banker. So we hold the money, and as different organizations do work, they can request reimbursement through the funding. When that funding runs out, we also have funding requirements. So that's one thing that we're really keen on, is making sure that as we do our work and draw down this balance for this escrow account, that we also include in our budgets a projection of how much funding we're going to need to contribute to this to make this a sustaining sort of enterprise. Let's see. This is I know this is difficult to read. We'll make this presentation available after the meeting tonight. This is a table we put together to help sort of get our arms around what is the ongoing type of maintenance that we need to be doing. This was really based on a couple of efforts. One, we have same creek consultant that was involved in the design, help us sort of assess what needed to be done, assess what sort of, if we needed any permit side of things. And then, there's a lot of engagement of just walking the creek and saying, okay, this is neglected, needs to be fixed. Friends of Five Creeks was involved in a lot of that, and it's actually pushed us in many cases to get out there and get things done. And some of the things we're talking about here are, just refresh public spaces. Over the years, the DG deteriorates, there's cigarette butts, there's seating, there's graffiti, other things like there's erosion on trails. So some of the things we don't have solutions for, but we wanted to put it on the list so we keep an eye on it. And then we get together regularly, and when we come up with a real solution, we'll add it to the table, assign a responsibility, and then that agency is responsible for getting it done. One of the things we did do this year as well is install some informational signs, and this is linked through Berkeley's 311. So if you see something, you can call that, report it, and then there's a process on the Berkeley side to get it out to all the stakeholders and then figure out whose responsibility to get it done. Because I think that was one of the issues in the work not being done, because all the new players weren't clear on whose responsibility it was, because one side's UC, one side's Berkeley. We have a stake in it, but it's not really our property, so it was a bit convoluted. So I think we've made a lot of progress, and like one of the things, and I think Friends of Five Creeks pointed it out, is that we want to be more transparent about how we go about our work, and again, we want to make this meeting that piece. And one of the things about noticing it is we went through our normal channels of noticing the meeting, which didn't include people on the Berkeley side of the creek, which we will incorporate next year. Let's see. Now back to
All right.
to the fun work.
Yeah, and it was fun. So this is the work that we did along Codornices Creek before and after. This is showing a stretch between 6th Street and 8th Street, but we worked all the way to the railroad tracks, and my legs are not this long. It's just taken in the early morning. This is before the work started. So we had a contractor crew come in. They mowed and cleared the annual grasses along the path, and they hand-pulled weeds in the native plant meadow near 8th Street. And they cleared weeds around the seating areas, both on the 8th Street end and the 6th Street end. They trimmed trees, shrubs, and vines along the pathway. And then they also removed invasive plants, which is mostly acacia. There's a lot of acacia growing, hiding in the willows everywhere. They also took out something called pampas grass and fennel. And the crew actually, they worked at 2 different times. They worked in August, and then recently they were working up until just a few days ago. So they got quite a bit of work done. And in the future, we want to make this maintenance more regular. We're not sure exactly what that's going to involve, if it's going to be once a year or twice a year or 4 times a year. So we're still working out the details of that. Next. Okay. So community partnerships. The city wants to work with all groups who are interested in the natural areas of the city, including Friends of Albany Hill and Friends of Five Creeks, scout groups, and colleges. So in these 3 photos, we've got different things going on. The volunteer stewardship groups. This is actually showing a work party with Friends of Five Creeks along Middle Creek. And then we've had several Eagle Scout projects. This particular one here, this one here, we had a Eagle Scout who got his troop to come out, and they removed a section of the invasive blackberries on the east side of Albany Hill. And he also actually built a bunch of birdhouses that he installed in different areas on the hill. And then the last picture in the corner is a partnership that we developed with the Merritt College Urban Arboriculture Program. And in this program, students learn how to plant, care for, and maintain trees. And so in this class, they used Albany Hill as their outdoor classroom. So they came and learned, practiced climbing trees. And in this photo, their pruning class came out and pruned and thinned some small oaks near the Madison entrance of Albany Hill. Volunteer groups are really important because they are the boots on the ground and the eyes in the field in our natural areas. They see things that are going on, issues, problems, which they can then report to city staff. And on the flip side, volunteer groups should also work with city staff, informing them about their work parties and events so that staff can then provide assistance if necessary. Next. So that's it. Any questions from commissioners?
Actually, I do have a question about the map you showed with the various creeks. I noticed Village Creek is labeled on there, but it wasn't addressed. And the only reason I'm more aware of it is because our conversation with the community garden as a part of our subcommittee. Wondering if you could comment at all on anything we know about that creek or any responsibility we have for it and or ongoing project or...
Yeah, I know part of it at the bottom here. This section here goes through UC Village, and so they maintain it and do maintenance there. As far as further up, I don't know if it's culverted further up or if there's unculverted parts. I'm not sure.
And I think it's that part that abuts Ocean View Park that's actually technically part of the UC that has come up. So that's why I was curious if that enters into your world. But it sounds like not really.
It does not. But I am in communication with the groundskeeper for UC, and he talked about doing some work there. They're going to be doing some pruning along that creek.
Yeah, I would just, that wasn't on my mind, but now that you mention it, since one of the big issues for the garden there was shading from trees on the seaside, and since this is an MOU that, connects the three, well, I guess Berkeley wouldn't be directly involved with this, it's not on a Berkeley border, but it is a UC Albany thing, and if there's a way to set up something where UC, it sounds like you're already working with somebody, or you know of somebody who's doing some trimming there. The people at the garden and maybe our garden subcommittee might want to talk about what kind of work they would like to see, ask that they might have for pruning to improve the sunlight from the southern end of the garden there.
Yeah, I actually talked with the UC groundskeeper about that, and there are restrictions. You cannot prune along creeks too much, especially in the creek channel, because of you don't want to open up too much sunlight to get into the creek. There are a lot of regulations about that from the Water Board, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's a lot of regulatory issues you can get into with pruning. You have to be careful.
Right, and it sounds like you already tackled a lot of those at Cerrito Creek, and so that experience can be really helpful at this other creek.
Just a point on that, our work at Cerrito Creek as well as Cordnesis Creek is generally outside the stream channel, so it's not the same regulatory framework as you get with willows growing from the channel. So that's a barrier.
I also just wanted to comment, this is a lot of tremendous work, and it's really exciting to see, especially in light of our recent addition to our purview around open space. So grateful to get this thorough update. And I just also want to acknowledge, although she may be making a comment, that we had a wonderful creek walk with Susan Schwartz and learned a lot on that, and a number of commissioners were able to be a part of it. So I know it brings this to life in a fuller way. So, you know, just to have walked that and be able to sort of refer back to that visually. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved in helping us be better stewards of this part of our city.
And then I wanted to thank the people working on it for the big picture approach and the long-term approach. So that sounds very welcome for those areas. I had a few, what I hope are quick questions. One is, my understanding for at least the Cordonesis Creek is that there's some bond funding involved with that. And is that going to go away? And if and when it does, is there a plan for how to continue?
So that was the escrow funding, so it's not necessarily bond funding. I don't know the exact history of it, but I think it had to do with some sort of land sale that money got put into an escrow account. So we are using that money now, and then we'll need to fall back on the funding requirements for that are prescribed in the MOU. So that's part of making sure that let's get the work done, but then also plan in our budgets going forward that requirement when that funding is expended.
And then another, you mentioned putting the presentation online. If you add it to the agenda, that would be great. And then for Albany Hill, is there any coordination needed with the planned, with all the maintenance you're doing? Some of it's on trails and things, and I know a lot of the trails are going to be reworked. I don't know what the timeline is, but maybe soon. And so are you planning around that schedule?
Yes, we are. So all this work is being done in Public Works. We have the capital side doing the trails, and Margot's doing the vegetation management. So we're coordinating closely on that work.
And then one last question was, I've walked the new ADA trail at the top of the hill and one thing I noticed, which is what I thought would be the case, is that just for the user experience, it's great in a lot of ways, but it has the shortcoming that I thought it might have, which is not the trail so much, but the visibility from the trail. And so for people that want to do, bird watching from the trail in the mud flats in the bay, for example, or just look out over the bay at the Golden Gate, it's pretty much, almost no visibility at all off the hill. And I was wondering, I know some of that land, if not all of it, west of the ADA trail is private land, at least.
Correct.
Some of it
Yes.
is, all of it. But if, the quickest and, biggest effect would be to cut down a tree, but there's also some strategic, branches that might just be like line of sight, that just if a few branches were cut out, like boom, all of a sudden you could see out to the Pacific,
Right, yeah.
So if there's a way to do that and approach the owners and that kind of understanding with them would be, I think, much appreciated from my perspective.
Yes, I agree. We can definitely work with the condo associations over there and see what can be worked out.
Any other clarifying questions before we open it up to comment from members of the audience? At this time, if anybody would like to make a comment on this agenda item, I welcome you to the podium.
So, Carol Fitzgerald. So, Margot, I had a question about when you have volunteer groups and classes. So, one of the things that when I was managing the urban forestry grants We were very holistic, and so at all the work parties, we had a lepidopterist and a botanist, sometimes an arborist and birders. And so they worked us back and forth, and I remember clearly when there was a certain time when Dr. Schroeder wanted to pull a non-native, and Robert Langston, who is very well-known, no longer living, but lepidopterist, said, no, you can't take that this month because my caterpillars need it. So we had this wonderful experience that dealing with the hill, that it's not all native now, and there are other species that use these various plants. So I just wondered, do you have any kind of coordination of having someone besides a botanist on call in your work? It's such good training for everybody, so.
We do have a monarch biologist that we consult about our work on the vegetation work that we're doing, especially along the crest where the monarchs cluster. So we have consulted with him, and he's given us recommendations about how to avoid doing any kind of work that would affect the clustering monarchs. As far as other butterflies and moths, no, we don't have anybody that we've consulted. Okay, all right. Right, okay.
It's difficult to hear. Do you mind either restating what Carol said or just for
Yeah, she said try consulting with the Essig Museum of Entomology at UC Berkeley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to make a comment on this agenda item?
Susan Schwartz, I'm the head of Friends of Five Creeks. You have my letter, so I'm not going to take your time. I just want to say we are happy. We are happy that we don't have to do a lot of the work that we used to have to do along Cerrito Creek, going up Albany Hill for a few years. We still work occasionally on Cerrito Creek. This is turning out to be a wonderful partnership. We look forward to the January 18th, MLK Weekend Planting Day on Codornices Creek with your Parks Department. And then on January 20th, a class from St. Mary's College. We are taking to work with Margot on the Hill and Cerrito Creek. I think also planting natives this time to do the planting. We're, I can always nitpick. We're very happy.
Thank you, Susan. All right, I want to open it up. I don't know if there's any discussion amongst the commissioners from that presentation, or if not, we can move on to the next agenda item.
I had one more question. Is one other major open space is the Albany bulb area, and so is that something that's part of this plan, or something we'll be hearing more about shortly?
So I think it will be at some point part of the plan. One of the things is really the extent of work we do there is just sort of mowing the trails for patrol access. So we're not really doing any restoration work, and there's still some compliance issues with the landfill and stuff we're sorting out. So it's really it could be included in this, but it's really at a different point than the other locations.
Thank you. Any other questions or comment? Okay. So our next agenda item is rich and exciting as well, which is a review of our commission work plan. This is the halfway point in our 2-year work plan. Hard to believe the whole of 2019 is almost behind us. So also with Isabel coming on board as our liaison, this is a great opportunity to go through the plan, and we're grateful also to have Mark with us this evening as we talk through sort of where we are on various projects. And so with that, did you want to walk us through it, Isabel, or how did you want to best do that?
I think we can certainly, the commission, we can go yes, we can walk through it, and then if you have any questions, Mark and I are here to answer, and then I would...
And were there comments that you wanted to make about the...
It's okay. Would it be possible to make a comment now to the kids that...
I'm fine with that, if everyone else is okay with that, yeah. I'm assuming it's about the work plan items, yes.
Thank you, and I bet you can guess what the comment might be. Just like to request that as you're looking at the work plan, that you maybe consider the addition of basketball hoops or courts at Memorial Park as part of the work plan, for all the reasons that I'll refer to from the earlier comments. Thank you. Oh, Aaron Frank, Carmel Avenue.
Thank you. Are you 11?
Monica Norton, Carmel Avenue resident. Yes, also I would like to, well, first of all, actually, I would like to thank you all for the dog park. We have a dog as of 1 year ago, and we spend so much time in that dog park, so thank you for all your work in setting that up and maintaining it. And I understand there's more development going on there, so appreciate that. And yes, would also like to ask if it would be possible to add into your work plan, you know, an investigation into whether or not it's possible to add basketball courts to Memorial Park. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also I was going to suggest that this is a status update, so any item that you feel need further discussion could be agendized at a future meeting. And if you want to indicate that when we're talking, then I'll make notes for.
And I think everyone has the document, which maybe for the purposes of this, it might be the easiest to just walk through in that order. So this is the document that starts on page 5 of the packet with a work plan, and actually page 6 is where we begin with the various agenda items. What I would ask is if commissioners have a status update on that item. In other words, if that's something you've been working on, if you can comment on that, and otherwise, if it's something where we have a report from, actually, would it be better for us to use the table? I think that might be better because that has the actual.
Yes, I think the table, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So on page 8, maybe we can start there, and those are organized. Thank you, Isabel, for putting this together.
Put it up on the screen for the folks at home.
I do have a question about just the bullet points versus the table. I'll wait. Do you guys know, is that redundant? Is it the same?
It should be those same
Yes,
items,
it's
just
the
organized
same.
with status update. Yeah.
So basically, I took each of the bullet points in the work plan and plugged them into the table. Yes.
And that's just the format that was approved by the council. So, yeah. So the first item, we'll wait till the screen comes up. If we can't put it on the screen, we all can look at ours, and it's okay.
At this point, unless...
Well, if you can go on the internet, you can get it.
I'm looking at it. Is anyone not able to see it?
Because we can't bring it up on the screen up here, so that's why I can't navigate.
So for our folks watching at home, if you download the agenda packet, you will find this on page 8 of the agenda packet, and it's a table. That should allow you to kind of follow along. So the first item, the first work plan initiative is under the objective of enhanced parks, and it's about analysis of turf and grass options for the Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park, which was a request by council. And so I think the status is living in Mark's world, so.
We're trying to plug. Working long distance.
So just a quick update. So we have engaged an A&E firm. In some level, it's just a workload issue of not having staff. We've had some turnover in staff. We have some very good staff that we're looking forward to bringing on in the new year, and we look to be kicking this off here pretty quickly. Again, it's just we have a lot on our plate.
And this is where we're analyzing the soil. Is that part of it? And
No, so the idea was to do a turf analysis to really have some good data on why we want to, if we want to improve that, the field with either regular grass, natural grass, or turf, and sort of understand the range of implications. One of the things that came up earlier in our discussions, if most turf facilities are sort of controlled, so you have sports, and when it's done, you close it. This will be more free-flowing, so that has dogs and things that'll have implications on maintenance. So before we jump in on any one approach, we really want to understand sort of the range of issues we'll be getting into.
And will an analysis of the type of artificial turfs be part of that?
I think type. You mean the crumb fill, crumb rubber fill? We're not even looking at that. We're looking at an organic. I think it was an organic coconut husk type approach. So we're not even. That's not even included in the analysis.
And is one of the goals also to get quotes on the different possible surfaces to make an informed decision based on?
Costing will be part of that discussion, and not only. So there's two parts of it too, where not only initial construction costs, but life cycle costs, because that's really more of a performance issue of what are we in for in the long term.
And if you click in the lower left-hand corner there, you'll get the agenda. Well, not that.
That should do it too.
Click above it.
The support documents, yeah. And
You're not done yet. You got to go down.
perfect. So then the next item is to assure that there are benches available as needed for seniors in the various parks. And I know there's some discussion of this about the dog park, but also other parks. Does anybody want to make a comment on where we are there?
I mean, other than the dog park, I don't know if we've discussed this as an item per se. I don't think we've thought about where do we need benches.
Oh, that's right. Not just generally, right?
Yeah, but certainly the dog park, we're planning on a number of benches, yeah.
Yeah, so one of our thoughts on the dog park would be to engage not an A&E type, landscape architect, not in doing a real blown out design, but just really a concept drawing to take ideas and put them in something that can be used to parse out what can we do as internal sort of maintenance projects and other things that may need a contractor, like changing the fence around or things of that sort. So that's our thought with that.
Great. Sorry. Oh, that sounds great. So it's not going to be like a full, because it seemed like overkill.
No. It's someone who knows better drafting than we do.
Great. Okay.
And then the review of additional benches for other parks will be part of the master plan update.
And then one thought about benches and things like that is, I know the city council is looking at dealing with rethinking or clarifying how gifts are handled, and whether memorials or other types of gifts to the city. And so I would encourage staff to look into how benches and things like that could be put on a list that people wanting to memorialize a person or a pet would have an easy way to help make that happen. Things that we want to do anyway, that it's ready to go when they're ready to donate.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move on to objective 2, which is about enhancing open space, and we have 7 initiatives under that. The first is review the prioritized list of projects on Albany Hill, which I think.
So we're essentially done with that. The access improvement project is underway. There's probably one update. We did get a grant in the amount of, I think it's $250,000 for, we're actually programming it to the bridge component of the project, which is one that was partially unfunded. So that's a benefit. And once all that, the paperwork and the grant becomes active, we're going to look at kicking off the design of that. It's actually interesting that most of Cerrito Creek in that area is in El Cerrito, so we have to work very closely with them. We're going to own maybe a couple steps on the approach to the bridge. So
That's great.
So I don't recall having reviewed a list of projects. Am I just forgetting that?
It's work plan? Or
No. We're talking about the first item under Objective 2, right?
the CIP projects, like whether you've seen that list?
Yeah, I'm just.
We did, is it
Maybe-
possible you missed a meeting? Because we definitely
We
had
did, okay,
meetings
that may
about
be the case, I
drawings
just didn't
and-
recall that.
Yeah.
Okay.
and I think this even
Might have
goes.
been before you joined.
It may have been,
I recall right when I got here about 3 years ago, there was a big push to line out the projects and present it to a number of the commissions. So I think it's been going.
I think
on
that
for
was
a while.
before I joined.
It was before you joined, because it was a little while ago.
Now, the only bridge I recall in the plans for the Albany Hill improvements in the north side was one that I thought was 100% on Albany's side. When you go from Madison down and around, it kind of crosses over what's usually a dry creek, but something down there by the Blackberry Patch or something, which I thought was, and kind of behind the Blind Institute. But is this something that goes across Cerrito Creek into El Cerrito?
Yes, it goes on this El Cerrito side. I believe it's Belmont, and so it would be a little bit west of where the trail dead ends into Cerrito Creek. That makes sense.
Okay. Okay, that sounds great. That's my understanding was that was not. I had asked about getting a bridge there, and people had said it wasn't possible, but maybe just it wasn't fully funded, and now it is. Maybe that's what.
Yeah. So from my recollection, it was one of the features called out in the master plan.
originally, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to keep us moving, but I don't want to stop any questions, so please make a motion if you're feeling we went too fast. The next is about the forest management plan for Albany Hill and the fuel load analysis, which just heard an update about, but a little bit.
So this is something we haven't made a lot of progress on. The idea was to really engage all the property owners more holistically in managing fuels, not only on sort of city property, but the other properties. I have to say the fire department has done a tremendous job working with the individual homeowners or property owners to get them to start managing their, getting defensible space and so forth. So maybe some of this is happening without a formalized plan, but I think at some point we would like to do that. One note on fire protection, one of the things we added to the Albany Hill access improvement project is a dry fire line that the fire department can pump into and have water at the top of the Albany Hill, which will help tremendously with fire protection.
So the forest management plan is a separate document from the plan that Margot is discussing, right?
Yeah, so it would be so the Margot's document really focuses on land controlled by the city, and this would be more of a collaborative effort among all the property owners.
Okay, moving on to the next item is the final measure R projects and the implementation of that. I don't know if we actually did present on that in December 2019, because that's where we are now.
That's right now.
Okay, yeah. It's happening.
Does that mean to the city council?
No, this is more of an update. So we've completed the plans. I think there's a funding gap on these. This, as well as the Memorial Park pathway lighting project. So we've completed these plans, and the idea is in the spring we're going to be having a CIP update. So we'll be able to formally update the budgets in CIP. One of the things on not Albany Hill, Memorial Park, the prior project was a single project that had a collection of scopes of work, And what we've done is close that out, so the project will be, Memorial Park pathway lighting, and it'll be just a very focused project. I think that's easier to manage from a budget perspective, because sometimes you have these various scopes of work, and they seem to all be running a little bit over budget, and everyone looking at the budget, oh, there's money here, and and ultimately there's really not.
It was my understanding that the Measure R funding was just sitting there, and we had been kind of sitting on it for too long. Do you know, are you aware of that?
We've spent a lot of that down. There's in the allocated for parks, we have more projects than we have funding in Measure R.
Do you all recall that?
Well,
it was like we were kind of trying to spend it. And
Yes, we were trying to spend it down,
Yeah.
and my recollection is that there were a number of things we could have spent with Measure. We had a long list of possibilities, and we debated this or that, and that the bocce court with all sorts of landscaping improvements and drainage improvements that the decision in the end was to just blow out all of Measure R funding with that, and to leave other things to find other sources of funding, for example, the mountain biking park. And so we're coming up short in the bocce court area. That surprises me.
I think it's because the estimates we were working with were probably lower than the actual construction costs, and I think that we did close out the Memorial Park project, and you can see that the cost estimates, the actual construction costs were substantially higher than the cost estimates.
I just want to clarify, because we just met about this in September, I think is my recollection, or October. We got an update from Shelley about where we were at the funding. And I believe at one of those two meetings, we were discussing the fact that if the bocce was 150, that left 65,000 for other projects to be allocated. So I just want to make sure that we're speaking all on the same vocabulary. Like, are you saying there is not $200 and some odd thousand available for those projects? Or you're saying the ones that have already been the plans and the approved, the money is earmarked, so there's not additional funding?
So one of the things, and this is a perfect example, I think we were programming 20-something thousand for the lights, the pathway lighting. We got a couple of bids, and they were upwards of $70,000 or $80,000. So with the context of that, and then we haven't gotten pricing from the bocce courts, but my sense is that we need to come back in sort of the context of the CIP to really line out here's our money and make the decisions about how we want to spend the money in that, so this will give us a time to refresh the estimates and really understand how
I would appreciate that, rather than just say, oh, we already said yes, so we're going to go ahead. If there's like new information and new budget considerations. Wondering, I just want to make sure, because I used to work for City of San Francisco, so I understand the bureaucratic process of the funding mechanisms. Did the download from all Shelley's brain about this stuff get transferred in a way that's like documented? That I could see it so easily like slipping through the cracks, just because like, oh, she knew of this other deadline. You know what I'm saying? I'm just wondering if we know where it all comes from, and the next deadline for the next thing,
So in my mind, I think it's great that you're talking about it and prioritizing. It seems in my mind the best way to make sure that we have clear is do it as part of the CIP, because that's where we do sort of a broader update and really like tune up the cost estimates. And that's where you get the most realistic picture of what things will cost and how much money is.
Then also what source, right? Because general fund is.
Oh yeah, that includes source, and that's, I call it the budget Tetris. You have all these things you want to do, and different funding sources, different restrictions, and then priorities, and you try to fit it all together to come up with something that meets all the needs.
And I think I know I mentioned this to Isabel too, but this was another part that Shelley had mentioned, was that California has allocated X and such dollars for parks and recreation funding to communities based on their population size, and that at her understanding that there would be at minimum $250,000 coming to Albany. And she expected to know that in September, and it wasn't ready in September or October, or even whenever I saw her the last time before she left. But that allocation was not a grant. It was based on your population size, and it was sort of an allocation that we could count on that would be deployable for these kinds of projects. So I mentioned it to Isabel because I know that that was something that when we all had the discussion about the various projects, we're kind of calculating in our minds that there'd be this pool available to prioritize what things maybe would best fit that. So if that's new information or if that's incorrect information, that would also be helpful to hear in the context of the funding overall in the spring.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard of this funding, and that's clearly something we would incorporate into the CIP.
I think it's Proposition 68.
Oh, you're okay, good. So you know of it, and it's big. Is there like a deadline to apply for it? I'm sorry, because I go by these state deadlines in my work, and it's like if you don't, you know how it is. You don't turn it in on time, you just lose it. So
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, we are on it, and we'll continue to find the information.
Also wondering, because I don't remember in my last couple years here, I don't remember like being ever presented the CIP with, it was so great, thank you. I'm just wondering if you can come back again to us with that sort of table or whatever it is for us to understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's probably something we should do, and I think a lot of, similar to our previous discussion, we're trying to formalize things a little bit more, and so I think touching in with more of the stakeholders, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay. The next item is an annual review of CIP projects, which is just a great segue. So I think I'm going to say we did that. We talked about that. Perfect, Julia. And then reviewing the maintenance schedule and plans for enhancement through Measure M funds. So we just heard from the Creek and Open Space today, and it sounds like in the spring we'll have a park maintenance update. So, any questions about those things from anybody?
Only that when would we expect that CIP sort of presentation meeting?
So my sense is we're targeting spring so we want to sync this up with the adoption of the operating budget.
It's a fiscal year, right?
So
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
so it'll be a fiscal year. So my sense is we want that to go to council in, I'm saying generally spring, so early spring.
Okay, thanks.
There was also on our work plan investigation about the open space that Caltrans has for looking at possibilities for a mountain bike park, I believe.
It's on the agenda. I mean, not the agenda, in the list somewhere.
It's the next one.
Next item.
Yeah. Can we scroll that one up on the screen? Do you mind? So people can follow along. Because we're on to page 2, which feels exciting. Are there any updates from Public Works on that,
I think this
Mark?
is something we passed on to Public Works over a year ago, so what's the latest on that?
So my understanding, and this is one thing that we're at the point with Caltrans where they want more engineered type drawings, particularly around drainage. And again, it's a discussion about timing, budget, and so forth. So we would have to go out and engage someone to do that analysis and develop that drawing. And so we haven't done that at this point.
So, but it sounds like not work that has to be done in-house, but someone has to do the legwork to hire somebody to do that. To contract for someone to do that.
Right, so we need to contract that. We need budget to do that, and then you need time to manage the contracts. And going through and working with Caltrans to do that is actually a pretty complicated process.
So before we leave that agenda item, then what would be your estimation for when, it's been over a year, how many more months or years do you think it will be before that would get taken care of?
I don't know. This hasn't been one of our, so again, it's a priority issue, and this is one where I think it's good that we're having this discussion, and Public Works is going to be more involved in these discussions, because up to this point, this hasn't been high on our priority. We have a lot of other things that we're doing that are driven by our plans and other requirements. So this is one that, we need to work in somehow and get it budgeted and prioritized.
I just want to acknowledge, is it appropriate to speak to this issue? One of the reasons I really appreciate Mark being here this evening is that as we sort of went through the work plan at this sort of midpoint, we realized a lot of these things are collaborative efforts where, Mark and Isabel have to kind of coordinate the timing, the budget, the workflow, the staffing, all of those things. And I feel like our work plan, which was a mix of our ideas, community ideas, and council's ideas, which was approved, didn't necessarily get overlaid into all of those other things that are. So this is kind of our opportunity to hear directly about sort of where things are and then also ask questions about that. But I think this other process moving forward will hopefully help those things be less siloed and a little bit more aligned. So that's just to acknowledge, yes, there may be things on here that are not yet moved forward. And I think that's partly because we have a lot of things on our list that impact Public Works, and yet we haven't really had those conversations, so. Is that the only thing you're waiting to make a comment about?
Well, I knew it was going to come up here.
I think, well, we will have a comment period at the end, but it's a long item. So if you're just waiting to make a comment about that, I wanted to honor the fact that maybe you could come up and make a comment now and then. Is that okay, everyone? Yeah.
It's just, because I do a lot of observing on Albany Hill. So the mountain bikers are tearing it up, and I guess I've mentioned that before, and probably others have. And even as late as Monday or Tuesday, when another neighbor and myself were with Robert Gonzalez up on the hill, there were two. They started at the top and they went all the way down on the swales and all the way down. So I know part of the creek or part of the trail work is there when they get down into the oak woodland, they're going to grade the part of the meadow that the young kids have made jumps. They're going to try to level that out. But I think until that park's built, I think they're going to come right back. I mean, why wouldn't they? And I don't know if that helps to move things along on is it BMX? But I would love to see an alternative to offer to those kids when, if I talked to them and said, this is what we have in mind for you in the future, but if you keep tearing up the hill, maybe we should just forget it. So anyway, it was just a thought I had that I wanted to comment. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other comment I would have about the item is that my understanding is that it would need a fair amount of soil, and one potential source of the soil would be the construction project right next door to it, the lower income housing. And the people there, I know from a workshop I went to, are aware that there's a planned mountain bike facility right next door, and that they were planning on providing gate access and things like that to it from their facility and various other things. So I would request that the city staff at least coordinate with that. I would like to hear more in the future about the overlay of public works priorities on top of what our decisions have been, because it's a little bit disturbing to me to find out that things that we thought were happening not only are not happening, but there's no plan for them to happen in the next months or years.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so I think one of the things that we want to do is be very clear on the level of effort that's required on these. And I think when this first came over to us, it was like, hey, can you take a look at this and answer Caltrans's questions? They're real straightforward. Caltrans, when they want something like this, they want an engineered drawing and line. It's a pretty detailed site plan, looking at drainage and things of that sort. And that's what, when we started getting into it, we realized that this is a much bigger effort than I think anyone just understood, and that probably should have gotten back to you.
So are you saying that there's no way it's going to happen? Is that what you're trying to explain?
No, absolutely not. I'm just saying it's not because this was a straightforward, easy thing for us to do that we just have a lot of these things that we're trying to work through and a lot of different priorities.
You know, I'm just wondering if there's any way our commission can support you, because I don't know if is there a Caltrans like advisory council or something? I don't know if, I mean, I know that you still need the implementation and the engineering and all of that, but sometimes, you know, there's different levels you can work at, and just wondering if if it would at all help for somebody from the city, you know, electeds to, not that we're electeds, but representatives to reach out.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So the next one is to identify funding to update the Park and Recreation Master Plan.
So the funding has been identified, and it just, the allocation needs to be submitted to council for their approval, and I expect to do that in February.
Great, thank you.
Curious, what is that funding? General fund?
Recreation reserves.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
So recreation reserves is basically a pot of money that comes from fees that we charge to people who register for classes, or and so there's always a fee that goes into the rec reserve, and the rec reserve is meant to use for CIP or asset replacement, or you know, a project like that.
How much each year do you get?
It depends. I don't know.
You don't know the range?
It just depends on the number of registration we get, and so.
Yeah,
but
no,
I don't have the range right now. Okay. No, I'd have to get back to you on that.
That'd be great to get that. Thank you.
And so would this be approved for immediate use by the city council, or is it something that would need to wait for the future?
No, if approved in February, then we could move forward with the writing of an RFP to recruit a consultant, and then work with the commission on the scope and move that along. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the next objective is about creating cultural facilities and opportunities. It has 3 areas, one on memorial, actually 2 on memorials, and then 1 about retrofitting the veterans building. So the first 2 items are about public and private memorials, and particularly on public lands. And I know we had talked about making a subcommittee that Brian was going to head up many moons ago, but I'm not sure where that has come, and I don't know if you have an update or if anybody has an update on this item. And
so in talking with the city manager about this item, we discussed the possibility of retaining some assistance, either a consultant or somebody who has expertise in creating inventory for memorials. So that would be the plan. Mm-hmm. And then we'd come back to the commission with policies of when they're written in draft mode.
So it sounds like maybe this is an item that doesn't need a subcommittee as we move forward, that there would be some work done by a consultant. So that might be good just in terms of knowing that we could reallocate that commissioner time to a different project that may need it, pickleball, just for example. So does that sound okay to everybody, that sounds like a plan to move that forward? Thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Then the veterans building, that's a very large project, I think. I dream at this point, it seems like, from the cost, but.
I think that there's some cost estimates that were provided to you and then to council. And
the millions, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is that completed then, that project? I mean, is that line item, the investigation basically, is that done? Or we?
At this point, yes, the investigation is complete, I would say. Mm-hmm.
Because I think this item was actually about looking at funding options, because the estimate actually came in after before we even did our work plan.
That's right. So I don't know that the cost estimate is as recent as 2018. I mean, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think the issue is that funding options, have those been explored? And if so, what did, I think, as staff come up with?
I think it's one of those projects, again, that we have as part of on our radar, and if we find funding sources, we will let you know, we will let the council know. Yes, exactly, and it's one of those projects that we keep, and when the opportunity comes up, we'll jump on it.
So then we get to the other items. Oh, sorry.
I just had a question. Isn't the Veterans Building a county facility? So there isn't an opportunity for a partnership with the county on this particular project?
I'm not familiar with the background, but I think the county would be willing to donate or sell it for $1, but then the city would need to do the retrofitting. It needs a lot of repairs.
And I suspect it's going to be something that comes back every couple of years. They're going to ask us to re-update the estimate and then continue looking for funds. Yeah.
Okay, the next items we actually spoke briefly about, which is the pathway lighting design in Memorial Park and the review the designs and construct the bocce courts. And it sounds like those are part of a CIP update that we'll have in the spring.
Yes.
So there's nothing more to do there right now. And then the dog park analysis, congratulations to the dog park subcommittee. Those findings were presented to council, so it's been approved and you're on to the amenities. Are there any questions about the amenities part of the project? I think that's actually a separate item. If I recall, the actual making of the dog park is the separate item from the.
Well, it says Public Works will engage consultant for the design of dog park amenities. So that's something new that people are hearing about in this meeting. And we have Mark here. What's Mark's estimate for how readily that will be able to move forward?
So again, this is it's not going to be a fully developed design. It's more going to be a concept schematic type drawing. Our hope is to get this done pretty quickly. This isn't a huge lift, but again, we're bringing on staff at the beginning of the year, and hopefully we can roll this out along with a number of other things.
And then my understanding is that some things were already decided, certainly at our level, but I believe also at city council level, about moving the gate. And so are those things that can just move forward as soon as the drawings are done? And
so the idea of coming up with this more developed schematic is that then you can parse it out and figure out, okay, we have funding to move the gate. Let's move the gate. There's what the Boy Scout bench that we have, so we can pour the pad for the Boy Scout bench, so maybe that can get installed in advance of something else. So it gives us a basis to parse things out in a way that makes sense.
Curious about the funding for that. Could you do Measure R for that or not?
I don't know how the funding would work on.
I don't think Measure R can be used for a dog park, if I remember. I think we talked about that. Too many legs.
Okay. What about a two-legged dog?
Good point.
Could happen.
Excellent point.
Any other comments or questions before I move on to the next one?
I have a question. So those designs will be coming to this commission for review?
Yeah, my sense is we would take the schematic that was, I think, the subcommittee developed and tweak that and lay it out a little bit more and select what type of benches and that type of thing, and then we would present that.
Mm-hmm. And so is the subcommittee's work on this item finished?
I think that, I didn't hear an update.
I mean, we're kind of integrating with the Boys, kind of working as liaison with the Boy Scout. But other than that, I
think so, really.
I mean, other than looking for more opportunity for location, but yeah, I think so.
I think it was really nice that the city council just wanted to go ahead and approve instead of consider the recommendations. Although we do have to get back to one of the council members about the fence or not. But anyway, so.
Why did you point to me?
Your sponsor.
And so, as you mentioned, the other piece is exploring additional locations for a dog park. Is that something we're sort of setting aside for now? Or?
It's very much like the funding for Memorial Park.
Right, when the
back of our mind, and when that huge piece of property becomes available, we're going to jump on it. Yeah.
Maybe an indoor dog park at the Veterans Building.
Very possible. Memorial Building.
All right, the next item is review the Albany Hill access and trail projects, including bridge and interpretive signs. So we have some good updates there because a lot of that work is moving forward, and we heard about the grant for the bridge. I know there's a subcommittee thinking and talking about interpretive signage. Is there anything, Ben, that you can report on behalf of you and Hillary, or?
Well, I'm actually wondering, Isabel, if you have any updates on this. We had talked
She's wondering if Mark has any updates.
vaguely about this previously.
Is Mark and I talked. And what we thought the next step for the subcommittee would be is to identify a vision for interpretive signage. And for example, what kind of signage would you like? What would you like it to address? So natural, cultural, historical resources. So come up with a scope, and then based on that scope, then we can, Mark can take that and scope it out as far as the funding and the cost, and because there's so many different styles and so many things can be addressed with interpretive signage.
So one question we had is what is the budget that's available for that signage? Should we be thinking about that with the vision, or should we present our vision and have you respond to that?
So this is the part. What I wanted to do is disconnect it from some of the other improvements that we're constructing, and scope it out the way we want it, and then look for funding to fund it, rather than, because I think what we're running into is there isn't enough money to do all the parks, all the projects on Albany Hill as scoped. So we're going out and getting grants for things. We're going to talk to El Cerrito if they can put some money into the bridge. So to me, it's a much better thing to bring it in as a separate project, and then we can get it funded. And that starts with, really what's the vision, and if it comes out as, what's the grand vision, the medium vision, and the Toyota vision. I don't know, something.
I'd also
A Toyota is an excellent car.
This is the sort of thing that it's a nice size project for organizations to sponsor. Rotary could do one, and the Community Foundation might be willing to throw some money in. So I wouldn't worry that much. I mean, you might, yeah.
And I think it's a bit of a different animal than building a bridge. It's different set of consultants, different set of people doing it.
Speaking of building a bridge, I want to go back to that bridge across the creek, because is that going to be bike pedestrian, or is that just pedestrian, or is it just going to be a bridge that anybody can use for whatever mode of transportation?
My sense it would be a bike and ped bridge. I think the issue we're going to get into is emergency access and what sort of loading we want it to. I'm sure the fire departments and stuff will want to drive a truck on it, and that's going to obviously impact costs, but it was a bike and ped was the initial.
There's been all these issues with getting a bike pedestrian bridge across Cerrito Creek on Adams Street by the orientation center. And the city is, anyway, there's anything that's learned in the process that you go through with this bridge would be potentially helpful to the city for that other area.
Yeah, that's a number of the permitting issues are the same. Bridges across creeks, you need to have has to be above, I think, the 100-year flood level and so forth. That will all be the same. I think the real challenge at the orientation center is it's their land, and they, there's a conflict there between what they do and running bikes through there and pedestrians that needs to get worked out. That's a pretty big challenge.
And so I see in your note here that interpretive signage to be incorporated in CIP as separate project in spring 2020. So that suggests that the subcommittee will need to bring ideas for a vision to the full commission early in 2020 for it to be ready in time for the CIP discussion.
So there's two parts. That's our next update. So if you're ready, that's great. If not, we're hoping to do, we can add things to the CIP out of cycle, but this is the cycle we're on, where if something's ready, this is the time to do it. But if it needs more time to bake, it needs more time.
Okay. Well, I'll work with Hillary on setting up a game plan for this, with the expectation that we'll be talking to staff more about it and coming back to the full commission, I think, early 2020 to discuss it further.
Okay, I've been deputized to move us on to the next item if it's time. Review park signage and establish uniform signage program for Albany parks. That's where we are. Where are we with that?
No, it's not. It's so basically, again, this is something that has not been started. So when it is started, we will bring you the proposals and for your review. Again, it's unfunded, but then would be included in the CIP based on when it.
And
I just want to make a point there with that one that I think we did review some draft sometime. Remember that? Over a year ago. But I mean, this is something I wanted to make as a larger kind of big picture stepping back. It sounds like we have a lot of projects, not enough budget, and all these other considerations. And I just, like that one in particular, I don't know that anybody on this commission ever was like, we need to talk about this one. So I kind of want to step back. I mean, not saying that we have to get into this right now, but it might warrant a further discussion where we look at this and say, is this really what we want to be focused on? I also, given the spring timeline for the CIP, I mean, it would be great, especially if we have more information about what some of these things cost and what budget we have available, to do some kind of public engagement about what does the public care about. Because, Mark, if you're saying you don't have the staff, the capacity, the funds to do it, how do we make responsible decisions as a commission without getting some feedback from the public? And I think the public, tonight was exceptional, but they don't usually come out here, and it's hard on a Thursday night. They have childcare issues. So I wanted to put that out there for us to consider since we're talking about this, and we're kind of just talking item by item. But I feel like I step back and I think, is this what we really care about? Is this what the community really cares about? And we certainly have to make choices because we don't have enough budget. So I just want to put that out there because you all have been doing an amazing job. We're like only a city of 20,000, and we have like not a big amount of money to play with. So I just want to recognize that there's limited staff time, and I don't want to like keep saying like we'll do this and this and this if they're not even important to us, So anyway, I just want to put that out there because that one especially.
so number one, I have been excited about this item, just so you
Out of the
know.
work plan.
But I just to frame it for the people who might not be familiar with this item, it's just kind of addressing the fact that signage in Albany in general, but in the parks in particular, it's just been ad hoc. This, there a sign is needed for something, so they just go out and get something, or styles have changed over the decades, and so the idea was to bring some uniformity and ideally reduce the number of signs, consolidate and things like that. So that's kind of what this item is. I just wanted to frame that, and I like it.
I'll just echo
on it.
I'll just echo that, like, I think they're all important projects, but I do think that it seems that we're going to need to prioritize, or there's going to need to be a systematic prioritization because there's limited scope in public works. And as I mentioned, a lot of these things sort of overlay with Mark's other responsibilities. So I think maybe when we get to the end of this, or perhaps upon reflection at the next meeting, or with guidance from city staff, maybe you could help us know what is our role as you view it, and how can we best be those partners for you? Because I think that sometimes we're working in parallel tracks, and this train went all the way out of the station, and this one is like still trying to figure out like, where does this fit, and is there money, and we're like way over here on this narrow path. That is a metaphor that died, so I'm gonna just
I
leave
do
that.
think the bulleted list reflected council priority. We had priority 1, priority 2, and I think pretty sure that was council priority. So anyway, that's just a starting point for the further discussion.
And these are also organized that way so that the first ones come from council, and then it gets to our top priority of the additional ones, and then our second area from the additional ones. So as we go through this, we're getting to the lower priority items because they're the ones that either didn't come from council or were lower priorities to us. We're almost to the lower priorities to us.
You're in the other work plan items section of your work plan.
But I think, but also I would say that the council probably doesn't know about these. I don't know that there's been that feedback loop where we.
Well, I presented all of these at the council meeting when they approved the work plan, but I don't know that this is our midpoint, right? And I don't know that we've had an update of anything about our status. I don't know that they asked for that, but I do think that it seems like there's going to be a curtailing of how many of these things can get accomplished in 2020 just based on
And I think they're just, in terms of like relationships, I think they are relying on us to say what we think we should, what we want to focus on. So I don't think it hurts for us to do that and then say, feedback to them like, hey, this is what we think is most important.
Like the signage. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, we did present, when we presented it to them, we were very clear that these are the things that came from you all, these are the things that were the top priority of the commission and the members of the public, and these were the next group, and then there were some others that didn't make the cut. So I did sort of share that, at least anecdotal feedback, but as you'll see here, I think the signs are in a higher level work plan potentially, so.
Yeah, no, I don't mean that I guess,
yeah, but maybe at this midpoint, it's good to circle back and sort of say.
What can we realistically do? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so continue to support the Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park improvements. Other than the turf analysis, it seems like we're good there, so everything's open and being used. Investigate the relocation of the community garden. So I can just share briefly that we've done a number of things with the community garden members, and we've met as a subcommittee, we've met with Isabel, and now there's going to be some maybe assessment at some point from the city on some of the questions that came up in our efforts to reorganize that space or look for additional sunnier spots to annex into the garden. So we'll be kind of putting that on hold while we're pending sort of that information, and then we can kind of revisit that at that time. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Ben?
Well, I guess since we have Mark here, is your understanding that our next steps is for the subcommittee to have a conversation with you about some of the ideas that have come up so far about possibly changing that space?
I shared with Mark the presentation you made, and I shared also the questions that you sent forward in your email.
About the drainage ditch.
Yes, exactly. So I think at this point, it's just, we need to also look at the contract with the community garden and just do a full overview of the program, and then address also the issue of shade and discuss how we can best address that. So we would come back to you with a pretty good overview of all of these aspects.
So it sounds like the ball is in your court, and
Yes.
you'll be notifying us when you're ready to talk about it further.
We'll put it on an agenda.
It'll come to the full commission.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
our subcommittee is pausing its work until this item comes back to the full commission.
Yes.
That is correct. Okay, the next one is preparing the mountain bike skills park proposal for Caltrans. I know we've already talked a little bit about that when we talked about the gauging the space in the other agenda item, which I'm not recalling the exact language of. But is there anything else to say about this, or does this really sit under the umbrella that we already discussed?
One other question I would have is, can Public Works declare that something's just a non-starter? I mean, are you trying to say that that project is dead in that location and that there's no way the city can do it? Is that what you're trying to?
No, absolutely not. I'm just, it needs to be prioritized in all the other things that we have going on. We're required to do a certain amount of sewer work every year. We're required to, we want to pave the streets. So there's a lot of work that we're ramping up. So it just needs to get worked in, and I think this is a bigger task than was initially understood. That's it. So just as an example, the work at Schroeder Creek, that took about 18 months to get to the beginning of the work, going through the process, going through the regulatory, and that was a tremendous effort. So these things aren't, just a couple hour tasks.
Okay, the next item is about a city master tree plan. So how could we provide input and help support that? And that has come up because of an interest in sort of having a larger scale vision for how that will work in the city.
Yeah. And basically, this process has been delegated to the Community Development Department, and they will begin to administer planning process in next year. And they will come to the commission as part of that process.
So, sorry, next year means January or?
2020. I don't have a timeline
not
as far.
Next fiscal year, but
No, calendar year, yes.
Awesome. Review and implement previous Memorial Park improvement designs, including the entry, bike racks, and additional seating. The last remaining improvement is lighting, which we have talked about and will be part of the CIP as a separate isolated thing. Is there any other comment about that or update? We talked about that.
Could you advance the, I ran out of power in my, no, it's fine, I can see it.
Okay. I mean, good for you, because I can barely, I can, but.
With my glasses.
Strain. Okay, and then engage the community in the planning of the Key Route Boulevard median improvements. I don't think there's any money for that yet.
Right. It doesn't seem like a park and rec thing, though. Isn't that because if it's in the complete streets? I don't even remember. You guys remember even talking about that?
Yeah.
Well, we have talked about, because Key Route was originally a linear park, going to be it was like on the idea to be a linear park, and it was sort of holding, and then Complete Streets came along, and it was like, oh, some part of Key Route is going to be incorporated in that, so that kind of got put on the back burner.
Even closing off like part, okay.
Yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
so that is, I think, just sort of in that space with the Veterans Building.
But it does say.
Not as expensive, but.
Is there anything for us to do? It says engage the community in planning, but they've done a lot of engagement around Complete Streets.
Oh, exactly. So that engagement has been done. Mm-hmm.
Establish a dog park that we talked about, which we have these amenities, and there'll be not a major plan, but a sort of schematic and all of that. So I think we've addressed that, unless anybody has any final comments or questions about that item.
Well, there was also, I believe, in the work plan to investigate the possibility of locations for, like a second dog park, for example. And that could be something that either staff or a consultant or the subcommittee could work on, and I would be curious what Isabel thought.
I think it's really up to the commission whether or not you want to continue to investigate other locations.
I just want to point out that there was I've heard from some people, some residents, about the desire for a small dog park, or even like a part of section, well, now it's not section B, Memorial Park, dog park to be, so I don't even know if that would make sense to consider that as, right? Because that would be the time, is when you're hiring this person to do any kind of.
I didn't quite catch it.
Sorry, if they wanted to, some members of the community have actually gave us a petition during our
That's true.
public workshop saying that they wanted some small dog park. And we don't even have a site.
So like separate.
For small dogs.
Small
So
dogs.
usually it's like a cordoned off park that like, so.
Right,
Okay,
so even
not
within.
a park, a section for small dogs.
That's hilarious. Oh, that's so funny. Anyway, so if there's a little area that we could cordon off with it, I don't even know if we'd want to do this. So I'm just throwing this out there. But I'm just wondering timing-wise, if you're going to have that person come out and look at that site or do any.
So we were going to work off the document that we got. And if it comes in and someone says, we want to put something here and make a small dog park, I mean, I don't.
Within that area.
This might be something for the subcommittee to, I mean, I kind of feel like, let's just do what we have now, and we could add that later. It's not like it's,
Okay.
but we could also look at another location. It seems like the Greenway might have an opportunity for a small dog park.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, I mean, I think that that would be something, I think the dog park subcommittee, I'd be happy to work on that and present a couple ideas and then agendize that and then put it up to a vote.
Okay, convert Ocean View tennis courts to pickleball courts. As you know, we've heard a lot from the community about this on all sides, and I think we may need some more formal structure around this issue. I'm not sure if others feel the same. So perhaps this is an issue where it would make sense to have a subcommittee form and potentially also agendize it again in early 2020 so that we can kind of either come to a consensus or assign some further work for that subcommittee. And I want to just make sure that that subcommittee then would fall into the appropriate process that we're moving into now so that there's alignment there. But
So
basically, I think the goal of the subcommittee would be to do further research and engagement with the community to try to get more input from both sides, and the pickleball player and the tennis players, and then come back to the commission with a recommendation or some discussion on
I mean, it
the
seems
research.
like a really popular issue, and it seems like if we did decide, it would be like potentially one of the easier ones. Easier, right? I don't know. It's paint.
No, I
You have to regrade the cement and everything.
I thought it was just, just paint, but it's not. It's actually fairly complicated. And I believe I spoke with someone and they said it's about $40,000 to
That's right.
convert a court. So, I mean, my sense this would be incorporated in the CIP and done as part of that.
And I watched the whole process in Berkeley because I walk by there every day, and I watched them do it, and I knew exactly what they were doing as soon as they took the nets out, and I was like, oh, they're going to put pickleball in here, and they did, but it took several months, and I think that Berkeley would be a good model to see like how long did it take and what was involved, because it wasn't just, like I thought it was going to be a couple thousand, just paint and a different net, but.
So it would be a process. It's first the engagement and the research, discussion at the commission level, then a recommendation to council, and then if it did go if you did make the recommendation to convert to the tennis courts to pickleballs and the council approved it, then it would be then we'd have to find the funding for that to happen. So it's a process. It's going to be it.
So at our last meeting on this subject, we asked for staff to generate some more data on the usage of the courts. Do you know if any of that happened?
No, none of that happened.
I'm not sure we ended up asking that.
We didn't ask that.
We kind of decided it's not practical to get the tennis court usage because they don't sign up. If you're not going to station somebody there, although Brian had the idea of a camera or something, but
Even that would be onerous to go through and figure out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think what we asked is for them to come back with additional information if possible.
Just whatever they had. Yeah, I think that's true.
With the transition in staff, that did not happen. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of a subcommittee to come up with options. We have this, this, and this. I mean, we might generate that in one of these meetings, but I think that would be a very long and difficult meeting.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of a subcommittee doing this, because I think we've heard. I think we have heard from the public.
That's right.
I'm not sure.
That's the only reason I wanted to ask is if there's anybody on the commission that in time of reflection and looking at the information has come to a clearer view, and in my case, I have, so I don't necessarily need a subcommittee. I might need it agendized again so that we can have a discussion and sort of move forward. But I'm also very open to understanding there's a lot of strong feeling. I mean, I think we've heard 300 or more emails over the course of those 2 months. But I also want to be really mindful of community outreach. So if people feel that that process with a subcommittee would be helpful in feeling that we've done that, or if other people are less settled and feel like they need that to kind of feel comfortable moving forward, I just don't want to prolong things unnecessarily if people feel comfortable with their decisions, because people have already been waiting for a number of months.
Yeah, I think just thinking of how we'd collect that data, and I think it would be tremendously difficult. There was that, since that last meeting, I don't know, you guys probably got those emails from tennis people that said this isn't the number of people. So we do have a little bit more data than we had before. And my real concern from that last meeting was that we just sprung it on the tennis players, to me, clearly didn't seem like they knew what was coming. So now that we've had time and they've had time to comment, and I would say, I don't know, we could still do the subcommittee, but we could also agendize and have a vote, but then do pretty good notification, talk to tennis coaches and talk to tennis team in the high school or whatever, to really try to get the word out that this meeting's happening.
I think I will say that because I was literally taking tennis through the city at the Memorial Court Parks when all this was happening, so there were signs up there and people were talking about it. But I think in the winter it's harder because people aren't playing tennis because we've had all this rain. So we just need to be mindful. I don't know if there's a listserv for tennis or not in the city email list, but if there are other outreach methods besides just at the courts, I think it would, or next door or something, because it feels like during the winter rainy months is a hard time to sort of capture that unregistered kind of group that are out there playing but not necessarily.
Well, it sounds like it was noticed at the courts, and what Shelley said was she emailed everybody that had a reservation for a tennis court anywhere in Albany the 2 previous years. So it was on some of their radar, and it seems like it's certainly on more people's radar, tennis players' radar. So maybe we'd be in a good position to have another meeting, but agendize it before the CIP. It might be good, though, to have a subcommittee, because hashing things out at the last time it was on the agenda with the full group, that was, took quite a while, and a lot of ideas were thrown out, and just like, I don't know. So it could be good to have the subcommittee to go through some of that and.
I think digest it, have a report, kind of process, and rather than trying to discuss or figure it out in the meeting, just have a little. Yeah.
Do we have, is this the appropriate time to identify that subcommittee, or should we wait till we've agendized?
No, you can identify.
So is there anybody that is interested in this topic and would like to serve on that subcommittee?
I could.
Brian, thank you for your service. Do we have any other person that is available to do that work?
Kind of okay, kind of not okay, I guess.
I think we have 2 folks that have volunteered to serve. Thank you so much.
I have to check with my wife.
After the dog park one.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item unless there's any other deep need to talk about that more. But I think we will note that that should be agendized in one of the first 2 meetings of the year, probably. Adding a cement table tennis to Ocean View Park, which is a item that came from a council member, I believe. There's no funding source identified, but we did talk about it in the bocce design, and so I think for now it just sits in the pool. Updating the master plan for Parks and Recreation, which it sounds like we got the funding, identified the funding for it, so will be, that was at a previous item too, wasn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So basically, I do envision the commission being involved in an update to the master plan in the next year. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Support collaboration opportunities with nonprofits, which we saw some good examples of this evening, which is wonderful. And it seems like this is more of a value for guiding the work rather than a specific project, but is there anybody have any thoughts about that other than just continue on as we're doing?
There was another group that we haven't heard from in a while that I think this item was sparked from, which was the Love the Bulb group. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that staff should be aware of if they weren't already, that there is that other group that I think development's been working with them, to help facilitate some of the arts and other projects they're doing out at the Bulb. So that wouldn't be like under Margot's purview, necessarily, but just something to keep on staff's radar, that there are groups like that out there that we'd want to hear from every once in a while.
Yeah, they've been pretty engaged. They were involved in the Friends of Albany Parks on the Bulb with the planting. They did the planting part of it a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
And we had a nice presentation from them in May when they did their big art weekend. So thank you for mentioning that. Pursue public bathrooms on the Ohlone Greenway. This is one of your passion projects.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
It sounds like that is, and I know there was interest on the council for that as well. So. That would be part of the CIP if that's approved, it sounds like. I think it was, anyway, I know they were interested in that.
It doesn't say on this thing that it's going to be included in the CIP, so I was...
As if approved, yeah.
So there has been some information gathered. I think what happened was it was on the Social and Economic Justice Commission's work plan, or it's something that they were working on, and then council said, since it's on the Ohlone Greenway, I think that was the reason that it should go to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Was that what?
I think what I recall is that we both had it on our work plan.
Okay.
And so when I presented the work plan, they said, oh, you may want to be paying attention to this other thing because it seems like two groups are interested. And I'm not sure if it sits with us or not, but I think there was definitely interest both from both groups and from the council in this. But I don't think it has been actively like voted on yet or anything. So, and I don't know if there's funding for it, but they were sort of investigating like, or talking about, I think, options in other, like how other parks have set it up and in ways that are not as expensive, I think.
So if we were to move forward on discussing this or deciding anything about this, oh yeah, I see, if approved, will be incorporated in the CIP. So what would be next steps for something like that?
Review information when presented to commission. I guess, I'm not sure what information that would be, but maybe. Well,
there has been some information gathered by the SEJC and by staff, so we could present that to the commission. It is a little outdated, but it could be a starting point for discussion and further action by the commission.
Okay. The next item is work with the urban forester on a tree removal education campaign for homeowners. And this was in particularly related to all of the sidewalk tree conflict and wanting homeowners to proactively be able to make good, sound decisions about what their responsibilities would be and what kind of trees to choose. And so it came from some of the street tree work that members of the commission
I think
did.
I was like subcommittee of one on that one.
I think you were.
And I actually just talked to my high school niece who said that that might be a really interesting project for the green, like they have an environmental club there.
Oh.
So I'm gonna follow up with her and see if I can just talk to them about like that as an option, civic engagement option.
So when I read this seemed like a nice thing that would fall out of the urban forestry master plan. So that would be like the basis that then could get developed further by a group. But that was my thought.
Oh, okay. So we don't know when that's going to happen, right? So the city. Oh, is that a priority one? The city. Oh, they're coming. Oh, that's coming in the beginning of the year, right?
Master tree plan.
Master tree plan would be done, and then this would follow that based on whatever recommendations.
So this is the plan
that community development is currently going to be working on. So
yes.
That's a nice tag team then.
Yes.
That does have a timeline because they're already working. It's been assigned to them. So.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll take it off my list.
We converted. Oh wait, sorry. I've skipped ahead. Oh, nope. Review the senior center expansion project. This one is like the Veterans Building, which I think for those that don't know, there's the small house next door to the senior center. There's been for years a thought of or a plan of maybe expanding that, but that's a funding issue, but it's a highly utilized service in the city, so there's an interest in that.
And how is that under our purview?
Senior center is part of Parks and Recreation. Yeah. Recreation. Yeah, and I actually will add that I know those of us who've been on for a while have had the opportunity to have a presentation about all the many things the Senior Center does, which was really rich and amazing. For those that are newer, it might be nice to have something in 2020, an informational presentation again about that, just because it's kind of remarkable, and with an aging population, Anyway, develop monarch habitat assessment. It was completed.
Yes.
For this work plan.
So I was a little confused about what this item really was. So at the beginning of the access improvement project, we did a habitat assessment, and so that is a sort of the guiding document. And then we have engaged Stuart Weiss, the expert who did the habitat assessment, and he provided input throughout the design. He's provided input throughout the construction, and we have him on contract so that when Margot needs them. So I'm not sure we need a new habitat assessment. It's ongoing engagement with folks, and this provides a backdrop for his recommendations, essentially.
Great. And I think the commissioner who may have suggested that is not here this evening. So if she has follow-up questions, she can direct them to Isabel.
And I did shoot off an email to Stuart and saying, so what's the shelf life of a habitat assessment? Is this something we need to refresh
Every 5,
5
10,
years,
yeah.
whatever it is. So I've asked that question, so.
Great.
When we get a response, we'll incorporate it into our plan.
Perfect. Then there was also support and review designs of non-traditional parks, which was pocket parks, parklets. And so there aren't any currently pending, it sounds like, but that's again just a value that we're trying to hold in a city this size especially. Anyone have comments about that?
I do. So this is a subject that I'm very interested in. And I know that there's been discussion of an additional parklet outside of Mr. Dewey's. I'm interested in the status of that. I'm also interested if there's any current additional planning on looking for opportunities for other pocket parks, parklets that could come out of the Complete Streets study for Solano Avenue. I don't know if tonight's the night to get into that, but I would be very interested in hearing more about it.
I think it sounds like this could be a good future agenda item because we could include Complete Streets information as well.
And they did just have the pilot parklet.
At Mr. Dewey's.
So I don't know if there was an arc of like motion in that, which was one step of that, or if it was just a sort of drop in the bucket, test it out.
I haven't been really involved in the parks. It's been a community development project.
My understanding is Mr. Dewey's is raising funds. They're
To try
working
to
on
do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I don't remember that coming before us. Does anybody else remember that coming before us?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it says those things are supposed to come before us. And so that would be something to keep on staff's radar.
I think because it was just a pop-up thing, it maybe wasn't a formalized, I mean, it wasn't a design of anything or it was just for a day or I don't even, it was a day.
That's not the sort of thing that comes before us. Yeah, that was just.
Dramatic. And then converting the Terrace Park playground from sand to fiber, which has happened, and then engaging the community in selection of a new playground feature, which is another kind of community engagement opportunity for 2020. And it sounds like will be a part of the CIP update in the spring. Whew, that's going to be quite a document.
Boy, lots going on in the spring, huh? A heck of a meeting.
Any other comments on that? No. Okay, we'll get to the final items, which is reviewing street tree removal applications. I wanted to sort of give you all a chance to talk about the process moving forward for that.
So what I want to do is sort of change how we do it, and this is something we did with traffic and safety. There's public requests come in for traffic calming measures. What we've done is group them at a quarterly meeting, so you do all of them at once. We want to follow the same model. And the idea would be to do it in January and quarterly after that.
I guess my question would be, doesn't that mean that someone would have to wait a pretty long time to hear the result of their tree removal request?
So we're trying to figure out the most you would have to wait is 3 months or so. It'd be maybe a little more than 3 months, depending on where we cut it off to. If an application comes in, 2 weeks before the meeting, we're probably not going to be able to get it done. But so there'll be a couple months wait, but I think that's a more efficient way to do it and get better product throughout the presentations and so forth.
The other question, or the 2 points I would just say about that are, I think as long as the public is notified that this is what the process is, this is what the wait time is, that's helpful just so when people are filing their application, they understand when they'll hear back. And I think the other thing I was going to say is, no, it's gone.
The only thing I'd be concerned about, I actually like this timing. The only thing I'd be concerned about is sometimes there's like hazard tree removals.
That's different.
That's what it was.
So
Yeah.
we do have a hazard. There's a method to, if it's an emergency or a hazardous tree, that we can remove it immediately. And what I've suggested and what we've been trying to do is when we run across one, John will notify me. We'll put together a little bit of analysis, send that out, and hopefully this is reaching you, but would come to the commission as well as council to know we are taking this action, why we're taking it, and so that everyone's aware of it. So if you get questions from the public, you'll understand what's going on.
I don't remember seeing any. I mean,
I certainly have. I mean, in the
Not
last couple of
via
years.
email,
I'm not
like
sure. I'm not sure I've seen one for all of the emergency removals, but we certainly have seen
Saw
one.
one or two, I know, at least this year, where it was a note that said this tree had to get removed because of such and such a reason.
Okay, maybe I don't recall, but I guess maybe there's only been a couple. But I know that sometimes John's come and say, oh, by the way, these have come down and didn't necessarily provide us. I know if it's immediate, you can't provide warning, you just have to do it, but.
So there's a couple things, and so we want to structure this where John will be tracking what he calls a dead tree list, and that will come with the quarterly removal. So, hey, these are the trees that are dead or dying, and we can talk about those. Then there'll be the trees that are the public requests, and those will get a different level of analysis. But then we have the ones that are, hey, this is a real emergency, and we did have one just recently, and I hope you all got notice, because we did. I know I sent it out, and I don't know if it, but this was that last windstorm. You know, the couple weeks ago, there was we had a couple trees come.
Is it a branch down on the street? A picture of a branch down on the street, like?
This one landed pretty significantly on a vehicle. Another one came.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
So we mobilized a contractor that day. It was a Sunday to take the trees out because they were dangerous.
But are you sending it to the PROSC email address? I'm just wondering, because I didn't get it, but I'm not sure why. I don't know what the.
We'll make sure you get these going forward. That's our idea. If there is one, because I think the policy says, you know, there's 60 days to come notify you. But my thought would be to, when we know we're going to do something, we at least get an email out so that people understand what's going to happen.
Okay, thanks.
I like the idea of doing them quarterly. I'm trying to brainstorm, like, internally, what are some things that would be time sensitive? Certainly the emergencies, you said those just happen. And then, but for businesses or homeowners, what are some things that, you know, like not just aesthetics or something, but like they're trying to, what are some things they would want to be doing that time might be of the essence, for example? We've had some building projects come before us where they're like, well, we want to get rid of all these trees, and that might hold them up by several months, I guess.
So my hope is that this will bring a more structured approach, so that in the case of a development, that gets in the queue and we have more time to review it, so we don't get sort of a last-minute add-on. And I guess from my perspective, clearly, you know, hey, we want to do this on a quarterly basis, but if there's some sort of unique circumstance that I can't think of right now, clearly we'll make an exception.
I mean, if there's, that was going to be my comment, that it can happen that community development can overlook the fact that a tree permit was needed for a development project, and I would hope that we would allow that to come to us quickly and not hold up the project.
Sure, we don't want to hold up anyone's work. We want to do it in a way that gets the best sort of analysis that's presented to you.
The only other comment I have to make is that there are things that might not be an emergency within 30 days, but might be an emergency within 90 days in terms of the risk. And so what I would just ask is that in this first year of trying this new system, that you're kind of being mindful of how that type of situation is coming across, and whether because otherwise it does seem like a very well-organized way to just address them in one go.
And from our perspective, if this isn't working and we have a lot of exceptions, well, then our process isn't working and let's change it. Maybe we go every 2 months. I don't know.
Great.
Just one more comment. You know, kind of the other end of this is the removal. So they're going to be stacked as well, it seems like. So that you know, we go through the process, then we get, you know, 20 removals one night, then they're going to have a list of 20 trees to remove, or 15 or whatever.
8.
From my perspective, that's a much better.
I don't know if that's
than from a contracting perspective,
yeah,
because
yeah.
What's frustrating is it's the same amount of work to do the contracting for one tree as it is for 5 or
Sure.
or
Yeah. Okay.
15 or whatever the number is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to run us through these last ones, most of which are sort of annual things. The annual review of AB 2404, which is, I think, our Fair Play Act. We look at that in the spring, so that'll be coming up, and Isabel can get that on the agenda. And then the biennial review of the street tree removal policy was completed last April, so we're in the clear there for this duration of this work plan. And then the presentations on Waterfront and Creek, it sounds like are in progress as we have more purview and things to think about related to the waterfront, that we'll incorporate those in the agenda, and also continuing to support the Albany Hill Creekside Park Master Plan and the biannual park maintenance reports, which it sounds like we'll review in the spring. Any final comments or questions about any of those last items, which are more of our ongoing items? Right, what a robust work plan. Whew. Any final comments, questions, or reflections before we wrap up this meeting?
I do believe we had a request to consider an addition to our work plan.
So I wanted to ask about that because my understanding is that we have this 2-year work plan from the city council, so we don't have that opportunity to put something on, but do we? So
you could, but you do have to go to council.
Okay, and we would need to agendize that? Would we need to agendize that?
Yes, because you need to fill out an amendment to the work plan and then go to council.
Could I ask that we then plan to agendize that as a discussion topic for the committee or the commission in January or February, so that we can have that discussion?
The baseball courts?
Basketball.
Basketball courts, yeah, sorry.
And then
It's late.
It's very late.
Well, here's a question. Do we need to agendize to just wonder if we want it to be part of our work plan? Do you see what I'm saying? Or can we do that now? Because we're having a work plan discussion meeting and just...
My only concern is because it came up in a non-agendized part of the meeting, that I feel like if there's anybody that objects to it for any reason, they wouldn't have an opportunity to speak to it if we don't put it on the agenda. I don't necessarily feel like we have to put it on the agenda and have all those people come and repeat what they said. I mean, this is the same issue with pickleball, right? We've heard it, but I think I would just want to make sure we have
the way it looks on the agenda. If we say it's like going to happen versus we're investigating, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would prefer actually just to decide right now to ask the council to authorize us to look into this issue.
Yeah.
But you can't really make a decision on it because it's not an agenda item.
But can we agendize it in
So I think,
January
yes,
to just discuss adding this to the work plan?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, but I just want to be clear about investigating is not a part. I'm just wondering about that sort of ruling. What?
I'm a little surprised that we can't just say we're going to look into it for some.
I don't think we can vote on anything that was a non-agendized item.
Right, so am I getting my sports correctly? Yes, the basketball court is an item that came from the public. It was not part of the agenda tonight, so if you want to discuss it as a commission, it needs to be on your agenda.
If we wanted to just add it as an agenda item, we can. But we're talking about asking council to allow us to add it to our work plan, which we do need to vote for. It does need, action needs to be taken, so that would be different. So what we can do is we ask for the agenda item so that we can ask council.
And so then somebody could, in principle, get up and say, oh, no, I don't want you to spend any time on this or to even ask council.
I see, okay.
Yes.
That makes sense.
A faster way to make progress on this might be for community members to go directly to the council at their next meeting.
It's probably 6 1/2 days, because then they're going to send
the
it back
holiday
to us.
break.
So it's the same thing.
Why don't we, I think we could put it on the January
Then
9th.
they have to then agendize it in order to make.
Well, that's true. If they spoke at the next meeting.
Exactly right. That's exactly
you can't
right.
get around that.
It gets a month out. It gets out
Let's
a month.
talk about this in January. Hopefully
Should we switch to future agenda items?
Yeah, so I think this is a great segue to future agenda items, and I'm going to propose that we agendize pickleball and that we agendize the potential of adding basketball to our work plan. And are there any other agenda items that people have identified wanting to talk about? We obviously will have a CIP update in the spring based on a number of those items.
I just would like to explore this idea of doing a public engagement around the CIP. We don't have to talk long about it, but just if we start wanting to do public engagement, it can take a long. We want to sort of plan for it. That's all.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is a public engaged process around the prioritization of items within the CIP related to parks and recreation and open space.
Once you're ready for that, well, I don't know when you're going to come back
to us with that information.
Quite frankly, I'm not sure we're going to have a lot of time, because we have not only parks, but the whole CIP, and I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of time for a drawn-out public engagement process.
No, I'm not saying you would. I guess my question is, oh, no, but that's why I want to get ahead of it. So if we could give you the feedback even before, during your consideration, does that make sense?
So
it's almost like,
You mean to prioritize what we want for
If we
Parks?
could even just I don't want to make this meeting long, but maybe if we could just have a discussion item, like a really brief, like brainstorming session about how to do some public engagement around those.
I would actually recommend, because I have actually been feeling that we should have an annual survey of the public about parks and recreation needs, that should be a standing, I mean, that's a needs assessment. So I would recommend that maybe at the January meeting, we discuss feasibility and how we might go about that as commissioners and what would be within our purview. Isabel, you can guide us in that. Then we could kind of scope out something that maybe could be done every January or every March or whatever on an annual basis, and that will help to guide decisions around needs.
If it's January or whatever it is for the agenda on the basketball, I would ask staff to include like what part of that area is owned by the school and controlled by the school, and what part do we actually have some say on.
Yeah, and right now there's buildings there. There's temporary buildings there, so we wouldn't be able to put back basketball courts in that area.
You could get creative and mount baskets on those buildings, for example. I don't know what the heights are and whatever, but if we don't control that space in any way, then we shouldn't be talking about that. But if we control the tennis courts, then I think that's what they're suggesting, is that then that would be something we would have. So what's our scope in that area?
Just like a boundary map or something. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Any other agenda items?
Well, I'm going to question this statement that you made about us not tonight being able to ask the council to amend the work program, because under agenda item 6.1, it says review the commission work plan. Commission will review items on the 2019-2020 work plan. As part of that review, it seems to us we could make a decision to go back to the council and say, we've reviewed our work plan and we want to modify it.
Well, but it was reviewing the work plan that you created already. This item came from the public, so it's a new item that you need to consider. And there is a form that needs to be filled out and probably reviewed by the commission, that will go to council. So there's also another step that needs to be taken.
A form officially requesting an amendment to the work plan?
Yes.
So it sounds like that's just with the holiday break anyway, that's probably just a few more weeks delay, and it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out agenda item, because basically it's a small discussion and a sort of request, but that would kind of get the ball rolling officially in January 9th.
Well, you make the request, it goes to council on consent, and the council will decide, and then we'll be able to add it to the work plan.
Thank you. Any final agenda items or words before we adjourn? I want to thank everyone for your outstanding service on the commission this year, and I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season for any that you celebrate.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Can you ever finish a meeting before 10?
Yeah, look, it's 9:50. I'm lucky I'm not asleep. I'm like getting to my bedtime.